Chapter 312. Beside the stream, Yi Xian was still sitting quietly. He had been sitting here for 3 days and 3 nights. There were no shortcuts on the path of cultivation. Even if there were, one could not be taken. This was one of Yi Xian's realizations. Because at this moment, he realized that his Dharma defensive realm was actually not very powerful. Without the Space Tao law, strictly speaking, he could not be considered a Dharma defensive realm. The Space Tao law could be used as a reference, but it could not be relied on. 3 days later, Yi Xian no longer used the Space Tao law, but relied on his own ability to comprehend space. And after a few days, Yi Xian could already change space without the Space Tao law, but he still could not disintegrate space. To reach the true Dharma defensive realm, he must disintegrate space, in other words, control space. While Yi Xian was cultivating, he did not notice that Xiaolinger was currently climbing to the top of the prison pagoda. It was not that she did not want to fly, but that she could not fly. Or rather, it was very strenuous for her to fly. Who knew what she was going to do up there? After an unknown period of time, Xiaolinger finally climbed to the top. At the top, there were 3 swords stuck in the ground. The 3 swords were inserted quietly at the top of the pagoda, as if they were suppressing something. Xiaolinger climbed to the front of the 3 swords and glanced at them. Finally, her gaze fell on the sword in the middle. When she saw this sword, Xiaolinger's eyes lit up, because there was a stick of candied hawthorn hanging on the hilt of this sword. Xiaolinger took the candied hawthorn off, peeled off the parchment, and licked it. In an instant, her whole body quivered. So sour. Xiaolinger blinked, her expression a little interesting. After a moment, she licked it again, and her head trembled. Although it was sour, it seemed delicious. Just like that, Xiaolinger sat at the top of the tower, leisurely licking her sugar-coated haws. After a while, she suddenly looked at the bottom of the sword in the middle. There was a small box placed there. The box was very, very small, only the size of a palm. If one did not look carefully, they would not have noticed it. Xiaolinger climbed up to the box. There was a small piece of white paper on the box. There were only 2 small words on it. Strictly speaking, they were not words at all. They were twisted and crooked. These 2 small words were, white. Stay. Xiaolinger did not recognize these 2 words at all. She gently opened the small box, and no one knew what she saw. Xiaolinger clapped her hands excitedly at the top of the tower. Not long after the Devil sect left, the Blood sect also left Qing province. As soon as the 2 sects left, some of the cultivators of the Divine Central Continent noticed that something was amiss. Thus, they too left or went into hiding. However, Qingzhou did not calm down. On the contrary, it was still as chaotic as ever. This time, it was the native cultivators of Qingzhou who were in chaos. Everyone knew that there was no order in Qingzhou at the moment. No one cared about anything. Under such circumstances, many people began to act recklessly. Most of the time, it was their own people who caused the most trouble. A few days later, a group of mysterious experts suddenly appeared in the lands of Qingzhou. Then, more than a dozen cities were suddenly massacred. Not only that, but cultivators in many places also died tragically for no reason. At this moment, the entire Qingzhou was in a state of panic. As for the desolate mountain range, the entire mountain range suddenly began to crumble layer by layer. Not only that, but a faint red appeared on the ground. 30 people gathered in the sky above the desolate mountain range, and their leader was none other than High Lord Lu. Beside High Lord Lu was Mo Xiu. And the people behind them were all true defensive Dharma realm experts. High Lord Lu looked down. This chapter is not finished. Please continue. Fong. Has everything been set up? Mo Xiu nodded slightly. Yes. As soon as the origin heart appears, it will not be able to escape. High Lord Lu looked around. What's the Blue Sword Sex movement? Mo Xiu said in a low voice, I've received news that Blue Mountain 7 Sword Immortals have left Qingzhou. At this time, I estimate they are already in Qingzhou. It seems they are prepared to fight to the death with us. High Lord Lu lightly said, no matter. This blue sword sect has indeed let them live comfortably for too long. Mo Xiao nodded. Not only did Blue Sword Sect want revenge on the Realm Protection Alliance, but the Realm Protection Alliance also wanted revenge on Blue Sword Sect. One had to know that the corpse of a High Lord from the Realm Protection Alliance was still hanging at the foot of Blue Mountain. At this time, High Lord Lu said, no matter what, this origin heart is of great use to His Excellency. There must be no mistakes. Mo Xiao nodded. Understood. I'll go arrange it. Finished speaking, he turned around and left. In the sky, High Lord Lu slowly closed his eyes. In fact, he wasn't worried about Blue Sword Sect, because he knew Blue Sword Sect inside out. What he was truly worried about was the mysterious woman behind Yi Xian. That woman was too terrifying. Even thinking about it, he still felt a lingering fear. A moment later, High Lord Lu suddenly opened his eyes, send someone to investigate Yi Xian's whereabouts. A powerhouse immediately turned around and left. Somewhere in the mountain range, Yi Xian was still sitting quietly next to a small stream. He had been sitting here for quite some time. Nighttime. In the sky, stars filled the sky and a bright moon hung high in the sky. The earth was silent. In Yi Xian's ears, there was only the sound of the flowing river. In the middle of the night, Yi Xian's right hand slowly lifted up. In an instant, the space around his raised hand actually began to distort. Yi Xian's right palm opened and the space immediately returned to normal. At this time, his right hand lightly pressed down on the river in front of him. In an instant, the river in front of his palm actually disappeared. Space decomposition. By the river, Yi Xian took a deep breath. Right now, he had not reached the true defense realm, but he already had the power of the true defense realm. The reason why he had not reached the true defense realm was because he did not have a heaven-class sword to devour. Realms did not rely solely on enlightenment. Every advancement required various aspects. Moreover, the true defense realm did not only involve space decomposition. One's soul, mental strength, physical body, and all other aspects had to reach a certain level to be called the true defense realm. However, right now, he only lacked swords. As long as he had enough swords, he could step into the true defense realm at any time. Yi Xian did not leave. He was still sitting by the river. At this moment, he suddenly thought of Yu Qi's words. What was a sword celestial? The so-called sword celestial referred to having one's own Tao of the sword. And what was his Tao of the sword? He had thought about this question before, but he did not think it through thoroughly. Sword. Why did he want to learn the sword? In the beginning, his motive for learning the sword was very simple. He just wanted to become stronger and he felt that swordsman was very cool. But now, he realized that the path of the sword Tao Yi was much more complicated than he had imagined. Especially when he was comprehending in the sword tomb of the Pale Sword Sect, he understood that the Tao of the sword actually contained too much. Moreover, everyone's Tao of the sword had its own uniqueness. Then, what was his Tao of the sword? At this thought, Yi Xian gradually became dazed. His sword intent was the good and evil sword intent. As for good and evil, he actually did not understand it very well. This was because the matters of the world were too complicated. Many times, good was not necessarily evil, and evil was not necessarily good. Good person? Bad person? If this chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. Looking at it from different angles might result in different results. But what about the Tao of the sword? What was his Tao of the sword? Yi Xian asked himself again. There was no answer. Not only was there no answer, but it was also a little chaotic. Just like that, Yi Xian sat in silence for an entire night. At daybreak, Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something and he took out a wooden figure. This wooden figure was none other than Yi Ling. Looking at the wooden figure, Yi Xian's lips curled into a smile. Soon, a memory of the past surfaced in his mind. It was something that happened many years ago. He carried his younger sister on his back and went shopping. At that time, his younger sister had 2 pigtails and wore a floral dress. At that time, he was already the heir of the Yi family, so he did not have to live a hard life. Yi Xian carried Yi Ling to a noodle shop. The 2 siblings sat down and Yi Ling looked at him with a bright smile. Soon, 2 bowls of steaming hot noodles were served. The siblings each had a fried egg in their bowl. Yi Ling picked up the noodles and started eating, while Yi Xian looked at her quietly. His face was also full of smiles. Very satisfied. Very happy. Because he could give his younger sister nice clothes and good food. Moreover, no one in the Yi family dared to bully his younger sister anymore. After a while, Yi Ling picked up the bowl and drank the soup. As if thinking of something, she looked at Yi Xian and grinned. "Brother, why aren't you eating?" Yi Xian smiled. "Are you happy?" Yi Ling hurriedly went to his side and hugged him tightly. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly gasped. Yi Ling quickly asked, "What's wrong, brother?" Yi Xian smiled. "I'm fine." Yi Ling nodded and then leaned her head on Yi Xian's shoulder. She did not notice that there was blood slowly dripping from Yi Ling's back. As the heir of the Yi family, in order to fight for the interests of the family, he had to fight with the other families almost every day. Getting injured was a common occurrence. However, he was very satisfied. Because he could change his younger sister's fate through his own efforts. Until now, he could not forget the life he and his younger sister had led when that woman left. At that time, his younger sister could not even afford a bowl of noodles. Not to mention a bowl of noodles, the siblings almost starved to death several times. The saddest thing for a man was to not have the ability to protect the people around him. At that time, he was still young. In the face of this sudden change, he was at a loss and did not know what to do. In fact, the one who was the most afraid at that time was not Yi Ling, but him. Because looking at his younger sister, he did not know what to do in the future. At that time, it was the time of his life that he was the most afraid, confused, and fearful. Under the sunset, Yi Xian suddenly pulled Yi Ling out of the noodle house. Yi Ling tightly held onto Yi Xian's hand and the siblings slowly walked into the distance. On the way. "Brother, can we eat noodles every day in the future?" "Yes." "Really?" "Really." "Brother promises you." "Well, then I want to add more eggs, one at a time." "No problem." "Hee, brother is the best." "By the way, brother, do you know what my biggest wish is?" "What is it?" "Hee, I want to open a noodle house in the future. I will make noodles for you every day." End of this chapter. Chapter 313. By the river, the smile on Yi Xian's face gradually widened. Sister. Be it in the past or now, he did not have too many thoughts. He only wanted his sister to be well. Of course, now, he also hoped that more people would be well. Tuoba Yen, Jiang Jiu, Shaowen, Ji Anji, Mo Yinchi, Ling Han, and the others, he hoped that everyone would be well. Of course, he also hoped that he would be well. However, it was not an easy task for everyone around him to be well. Strength. He had to have strength. Powerful strength. When he thought of this, Yi Xian suddenly came to a realization. Sword path? What kind of sword path did he want? Actually, he only wanted to become stronger. Strength. When he thought of this, a sword intent suddenly swept out from Yi Xian's body. Good and evil sword intent. 2 sword intents spread out from Yi Xian's body and drifted in all directions. The 2 sword intents drifted in all directions like a gust of wind. Soon, the entire mountain range was filled with Yi Xian's sword intent. And his sword intent was also quietly changing. Strength. A man must have strength. If he didn't have strength, he would be nothing. Even if he had strength, he might not be able to keep it a secret. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's sword path was the path of an expert. The sword was only a way for him to become stronger. Of course, he also liked the sword. What was his sword path? This time, Yi Xian had an answer. His sword path was the path of an expert. How strong must he be? He was not ambitious. As long as he was strong enough that no one dared to bully him, he would be free. When he thought of this, Yi Xian stood up. The moment he stood up, the sword intents in the entire mountain range suddenly gathered towards Yi Xian. Soon, the sword intents all surged into Yi Xian's body. Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed, and he quickly sat down cross-legged. He opened his right hand, and a sword suddenly appeared in his palm. In next to no time, the sword in his palm started to tremble violently. At the same time, strands of sword intent surged incessantly into the sword, and the sword in his hand trembled even more violently as if it was on the verge of shattering. Yi Xian's expression was solemn because he noticed that his sword intent was raging within his body at this moment. He'd utilized his sword to draw it out, but it didn't seem to have any effect. What was going on? Yi Xian quickly asked, "Second floor guru?" The Almighty on the second floor did not reply. Yi Xian asked again, "If you don't speak, I'm going to die." At this moment, he was extremely uncomfortable. It felt like his body was about to explode. At this moment, the second floor guru suddenly said, "Sword intent changes, guide." Idiot. How can I guide it? Yi Xian was burning with anxiety. I don't know either. Hearing this, Yi Xian was so angry that he almost went berserk. If you don't know, then why did you say it? Without asking the second floor guru any further, Yi Xian quickly released his sword intent again. Soon, his sword intent floated around like before, and at this moment, he felt much more relaxed. However, those sword intents, at this moment, Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something, and he frowned. My body can no longer contain my sword intent. Does this mean that in the future, my sword intent will become one with heaven and earth? At this point, his expression suddenly changed. Sword immortal? Have I become a sword immortal? With that said, this chapter is not over. Please continue to the next page. He pointed his fingers forward. Chi! A ray of sword light shot out, and a giant rock dozens of feet away was instantly pierced. Yi Xian was stunned. Because he realized that the feeling was different. This feeling was very strange, very, very strange, because when he used this sword just now, the speed of the sword was much faster than before. Not only that, he felt that there was something else in this sword. Spirituality. He thought of this word. Yi Xian turned around and pointed his finger again. The moment he pointed, the sword on the ground in the distance suddenly flew up, and the next moment, it directly pierced through an ancient tree dozens of feet away from him. Now, he could use the sword as he pleased. Not only that, but he also realized that as long as he willed it, his sword intent would appear in the surroundings at any time. Now, his sword intent was everywhere. A moment later, Yi Xian suddenly received a voice transmission, and in the next moment, he flew up into the sky on his sword. His speed was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the vast horizon. The desolate mountain range. At this moment, the desolate mountain range had changed beyond recognition. The ground had cracked, and magma flowed out. The surroundings were filled with a pungent smell of blood. On this mountain range, there was a huge light formation that covered the entire desolate mountain range. In the sky above the desolate mountain range, High Lord Lu and the others waited quietly. On the other side, Chen Beihan and the others were also waiting. They were all waiting for the birth of the origin heart of Qingzhou. Not only Pale Sword Sect and the Realm Defense Alliance, but many forces in the Divine Central Continent were also paying attention to you. Because this time, it was very likely that this would be a battle to the death between the Realm Defense Alliance and Pale Sword Sect. This battle was very likely to affect the entire structure of the Divine Central Continent. Whether it was the Realm Defense Alliance or Pale Sword Sect, they were both top forces. If these two top forces were to fight to the death, the impact would be enormous. Therefore, many forces were constantly paying attention to Qingzhou, including the Mystic Gate. The one who had come to Qingzhou this time was Mu Zhaoling, who Yi Xian had met once before. And the one who had transmitted the voice transmission to Yi Xian was also Mu Zhaoling. In front of a waterfall, Yi Xian landed on his sword. Beside the waterfall sat a woman. This person was Mu Zhaoling. Seeing Yi Xian, Mu Zhaoling got up and walked in front of Yi Xian. Then, she sized up Yi Xian with some surprise in her eyes. You seem to have become stronger again. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Mu, how is my sister? Now, the one he was most worried about was Yi Ling. Mu Zhaoling nodded slightly. Don't worry, she's fine. The current her is already at the Dharma controlling realm. However, this time, we didn't tell her about the matter between you and the Realm Defense Alliance because we didn't want to affect her. Please understand. Yi Xian smiled. It's fine. In fact, he also didn't want Yi Ling to know about the matter between him and the Realm Defense Alliance. Otherwise, who knew how anxious this girl would be? Mu Zhaoling glanced at Yi Xian and said softly, You really want to stop the Realm Defense Alliance from obtaining the Azure Province's origin heart? Yi Xian nodded. Mu Zhaoling shook her head slightly. It's not wise to go head-on against the Realm Defense Alliance. However, the grudge between your Azure Sword sect and the Realm Defense Alliance is indeed unresolvable. Yi Xian smiled. You didn't come here just to chat with me, right? Mu Zhaoling said, Of course not. This time, I came to ask if you are willing to leave the Azure world. Leave the Azure world? Yi Xian was a little puzzled. What do you mean? Mu Zhaoling pondered for a moment and then said, This world is very big, much bigger than you can imagine. Outside, there is a wider stage. This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. If you are willing to leave, my celestial sect is willing to protect you. Leave. Yi Xian didn't even think about it and shook his head. In this kind of situation, he couldn't leave. Azure Sword sect had treated him well. If he left now, he would be too inhumane. Moreover, he had many friends and family in Azure Province. If he left, it would be difficult to protect them from the Realm Defense Alliance. You don't want to go out and take a look? Mu Zhaoling asked. Yi Xian smiled. I want to, but not now. Mu Zhaoling said in a low voice, Forgive me for being blunt, but if you don't leave now, you might not be able to leave in the future even if you want to. Yi Xian frowned. Do you know something? Mu Zhaoling hesitated for a moment and then said, The Realm Defense Alliance isn't that simple. You should know that even a genius like the Azure Sword Master couldn't destroy it, let alone now. Although many powers in the Divine Central Continent don't like the Realm Defense Alliance, it is still the #1 power in the Azure world. At this point, she looked at Yi Xian. My celestial sect has also heard of the mysterious woman behind you. She shouldn't be simple, but I can only tell you that the Realm Defense Alliance isn't simple either. If it's possible, it's best that you leave the Azure world with us now. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. I appreciate Celestial Sect's good intentions. Mu Zhaoling said in a low voice, Don't you think about your sister? If something happens to you, what will happen to her? Yi Xian was silent for a moment and then said, My sister is someone close to me. For her, I am willing to do anything. But if I leave now, I will be running away. I will be a coward. Behind me are my friends, my brothers, and my woman. Do you understand? Mu Zhaoling looked deeply at Yi Xian. Then I wish you good luck. With that, she turned and left. Next to the waterfall, Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. Actually, I also want to run, but in life, there are some things that I have to do even if I know I might die. At this moment, he took out the voice transmission stone. Soon, a voice rang out from the voice transmission stone. A moment later, Yi Xian turned around and soared into the sky on his sword. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the vast horizon. Yi Xian arrived at the edge of the mountain range, where he saw Chen Beihan and Sung Xian. Yi Xian bowed slightly to the two. "Greetings, sect master, greetings martial uncle." Chen Beihan nodded. "Azure Prefecture may be in chaos. Tell your friends in Azure Prefecture to pay attention." Yi Xian nodded. "I will inform them." Chen Beihan added, "If chaos breaks out, don't interfere." Yi Xian grinned. "I can already fight against the true imperial law stage." Chen Beihan smiled. "I know, but you have more important things to do, and that is to live well." "Live well?" Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Just as he was about to ask, Chen Beihan suddenly said, 10 miles to the right, your master is waiting for you. Go." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then nodded and turned to leave. Looking in the direction Yi Xian left, Chen Beihan softly said, "Shangyu, Nangong, Yi Xian. The future of the Blue Sword sect may have to rely on these three little guys." Sung Xian nodded. Fortunately, the three of them seem to have a good relationship. There won't be any internal strife in the future. Chen Beihan smiled. Although this kid has a bad temper, if he treats someone as his own, he will be very loyal. Unfortunately, this temper. Sigh, it's just too irritable. Just like eldest senior brother back then. With that, the two looked at each other and smiled. P.S. Today is Valentine's Day, I'm a little busy, I have a few appointments. End of this chapter. Chapter 314. On the other side, Yi Xian came to a small mountain. Yu Qi was sitting quietly at the top of the mountain. Yi Xian walked to Yu Qi's back and bowed, "Greetings, master." Yu Qi nodded, "Sit down." Yi Xian sat beside Yu Qi. Yu Qi raised his head to look at the distant sky and said softly, "Do you know the most glorious era of Pale Sword Sect?" Yi Xian nodded, "When Pale World Sword Master was still alive." Yu Qi nodded, "Back then, when Ancestor was still alive, the entire Azure world, including the Realm Protection Alliance, had to lower their heads to Pale Sword Sect. That was the most glorious era of Pale Sword Sect. Unfortunately, after Ancestor left, Pale Sword Sect no longer had someone like him." Speaking of this, she seemed to have thought of something and said softly, "Actually, eldest senior brother was the most likely to become someone like Ancestor, unfortunately." Speaking of this, she did not continue. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "Unfortunately what?" Yu Qi was silent for a moment, then said softly, "Unfortunately, his sword heart had once collapsed, otherwise, he would not have achieved what he has today." Sword heart collapsed? Yi Xian frowned, "How did it collapse?" Yu Qi said calmly, "Women." "Women." Yi Xian, Yu Qi raised his head to look at the distant sky and said softly, "That year, eldest senior brother was too amazing, so amazing that even the younger generation of Xian Gate could not suppress him. This made the Realm Protection Alliance afraid. They did not want a second Ancestor to appear in Azure World, but they could not kill eldest senior brother. Thus, they used a honey trap." "Honey trap?" Yi Xian's expression froze. This was so fucking melodramatic. Yu Qi said again, "A woman from the Realm Protection Alliance deliberately approached eldest senior brother. Eldest senior brother did not care at first, but unfortunately, that woman was not an ordinary person. In short, the two of them ended up together. However, in the end, eldest senior brother killed her with his own hands." Yi Xian frowned, "Even if she's from the Realm Protection Alliance, she shouldn't have killed him. Or did the other party do something?" Yu Qi glanced at Yi Xian and nodded, "That woman was also sincere towards eldest senior brother. No matter what, she wouldn't harm eldest senior brother. The Realm Defense Alliance had no choice but to change their method, and that was to use that woman to kill me, who was the previous sect leader of our Blue Sword sect." Speaking of this, she lay on the ground. After a moment of silence, she said, "That time, the previous sect master was surrounded and killed by dozens of mysterious experts. After the incident, eldest senior brother could not accept this reality. His sword heart instantly shattered, and his strength directly dropped from the true defense law realm to the nether passage realm. Not only that, he, who was originally a sword immortal, also dropped to the level of sword master. Yi Xian fell silent. He did not expect that the Realm Protection Alliance and Sung Sword Sect had so many grudges between them. At this time, Yu Qi said, eldest senior brother has left the sect for a long time. He has never returned to the sect because second senior brother stopped him from taking revenge against the Realm Protection Alliance. Regarding this matter, he has always been brooding over it. Yi Xian said softly, Master, you definitely can't take it to heart, right? Yu Qi gently brushed her hair behind her ear. In the beginning, I couldn't take it to heart. It was definitely because second senior brother was afraid of death. But after so many years, I gradually understood his painstaking efforts. Eldest senior brother's temper is the same as yours, a fiery one who cannot bear the slightest bit of anger. But second senior brother is different, he considers many things. At that time, if we went to fight the Realm Protection Alliance, not only would we lose, we would also lose countless Sung Sword Sect disciples. Speaking of this, she looked at Yi Xian. He was right. Yi Xian grinned, Master, what do you want to say? Yu Qi looked at Yi Xian. There was a complicated expression in his eyes. You are very outstanding, just like eldest senior brother in the past, but your temper is too explosive. I am a little worried that in the future, I worry that in the future, when you encounter something, you will not consider the big picture, only acting according to your temper. At that time, you will harm many people around you. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then smiled and said, Actually, I am also quite smart. Yu Qi shook her head slightly. I am not saying you are stupid, not only are you not stupid, but many times you are quite shrewd, but if someone annoys you, you will disregard everything. Regarding this, I am very worried. Hearing this, Yi Xian's heart warmed slightly. He smiled and said, This can't be helped. I am a person who cannot bear anger, and I also cannot bear to see my friends and brothers being bullied. But Master, then again, people only live for a lifetime, why let themselves be bullied? In any case, I, Yi Xian, will not casually bully others, but if anyone dares to bully me, I will definitely beat him to death. In Qingcheng, he understood a truth. As a person, you can be a good person, but you absolutely cannot not have a temper. Because often the ones who are bullied the most are the good people. Yu Qi glanced at Yi Xian. She lightly patted Yi Xian's head. I did not say that you cannot fight back if you are bullied. What I mean is, in the future, you need to consider things more carefully, understand? Yi Xian smiled and said, I understand. Yu Qi shook her head slightly, glib tongue. Saying this, she seemed to have thought of something and fell silent. Yi Xian said softly, Are you worried about the Realm Protection Alliance? Yu Qi nodded. This time, the Realm Protection Alliance has mobilized their entire army. If they are allowed to obtain the origin heart of Qingzhou, forget it, let's not think about this. In short, after so many years of grievances, it is time to put an end to it. Saying this, she looked at Yi Xian. If things reach the worst situation, you leave, find a place to hide, and do not appear again, understand? Yi Xian was silent. He knew that the entire Blue Sword sect, including Yu Qi's master, had already prepared for the worst. A battle of life and death. At this time, Yu Qi suddenly patted his head. Did you hear that? Yi Xian grinned. I heard it. Saying this, he sat in front of Yu Qi and said seriously, Master Yu, can we discuss something? Yu Qi blinked. What? Yi Xian said seriously, there are so many swords in the sword tomb. Yu Qi shook her head. No, those swords are left there for the sect disciples to study. Moreover, many of the swords are the inheritance of some sect seniors, don't touch them. Saying this, she paused slightly, then said, If one day we are no longer here, you can do whatever you want with them. Not here. Yi Xian was silent. After a moment, he said softly, How can we not be here? We must all live well. On the other side, above the clouds, Lu Xun glanced down. At this moment, the wasteland mountain range had completely collapsed, turning into a land of magma. Beside Lu Xun, Mo Xiu said in a low voice, "The time should be right." Lu Xun nodded, "Let them begin, draw out the origin heart." Mo Xiu nodded slightly, then turned and left. After a moment, a huge blood-red light curtain suddenly covered the entire wasteland, and within this light curtain, countless blood continuously soaked into the ground. In the clouds, Lu Xun and the others stared down, while around them, hundreds of thousands of true Imperial Law Realm experts were waiting for the origin heart to appear. Just like this, they waited and waited. Several hours passed, but there was no movement from the ground. Even at dawn the next day, there was still no movement. In the clouds, Lu Xun frowned deeply. "What's going on?" Beside him, Mo Xiu hesitated, then said, "Maybe there is not enough blood." After a moment of silence, Lu Xun said, "Then continue." Mo Xiu was a little hesitant. "What?" Lu Xun asked. Mo Xiu said in a low voice, "This grand formation consumes too many spirit stones. We have already spent nearly 100,000 violet origin crystals. 100,000 violet origin crystals. Even if the Realm Defense Alliance was rich and overbearing, it still felt somewhat painful." Lu Xun was silent for a moment, then said, "Continue, at all costs." Mo Xiu nodded, turned around, and left. Chapter 315. In the wasteland, countless drops of blood seeped into the earth every day. Whether it was the Realm Defense Alliance or the Pale Sword Sect, they were all waiting for the Qingzhou origin heart to appear. Once it appeared, the war would begin. However, the origin heart didn't move at all. 2 days later, the faces of Supremacy Lu and the others sank. They had already noticed that something was wrong. High in the clouds, Supremacy Lu said, "Something's wrong." Mo Xiu's face was gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. Supremacy Lu suddenly said, "Could it have been obtained by the Pale Sword Sect?" Mo Xiu shook his head. "That's impossible. The Pale Sword Sect couldn't have obtained the Qingzhou origin heart without anyone knowing. You should know that without the support of the Grand Array, if the origin heart resists, it will cause the world's spiritual energy to fluctuate. Unless it willingly follows the Pale Sword Sect. However, that's impossible." "Willingly follow?" Supremacy Lu shook his head. He also felt that it was impossible. The origin heart was extremely wary of humans, so it was impossible for it to willingly follow them. After a moment of silence, Supremacy Lu said, "Let's go to the Divine Divination Sect and ask that old faker to help us." "Forget it, I'll go myself." With that, he turned and left. Not long after, Supremacy Lu returned to the Central Divine Prefecture. He arrived at the top of a barren mountain. There was only a dilapidated palace on the mountain. Above the palace's entrance was a plaque with 3 words that were almost unrecognizable: Divine Divination Sect. Lu Xun walked into the hall. Inside the hall, there was an old man lying on the ground. This old man wore a loose gray robe, and his entire body exuded a strong smell of alcohol. Supremacy Lu walked in front of the old man and placed a wine bottle beside him. The old man immediately sat up and grabbed the bottle, drinking it in one gulp. A moment later, he lay back down in satisfaction. Supremacy Lu said, "I have a request." The old man waved his hand. "Old man Lu, if it's about divination, then don't mention it." Supremacy Lu said, "You must help me with this." The old man sat up and stared coldly at Lord Lu. "You should know why our divine fortune-telling sect ended up like this. It's because we divined the secrets of heaven and were punished by heaven." Supremacy Lu nodded slightly. "I naturally understand, but this time, it's very important to our Realm Defense Alliance. This is the last time. After this time, I will not come here again. Is that okay?" The old man fell silent for a moment before he said, "What is it?" High Lord Lu said in a deep voice, "The Green Province's origin heart." The old man shook his head. "You don't have to waste your efforts. The origin heart has already fallen into someone else's hands. Hearing this, Lord Lu's pupils shrank. What do you mean? The old man said indifferently, what do you mean? The heart of origin is no longer in the Green Province. It has fallen into the hands of someone else. Supremacy Lu glared at the old man. How did you know? The old man fell silent for a moment before he said, Old man Lu, even though I don't know what your Realm Defense Alliance wants the origin heart for, but I'll say one more thing. The origin heart of Azure Continent can't be compared to the origin heart of Darkwave Continent. It is blessed by the heavens, so it's best if you don't have any designs on it. High Lord Lu's expression returned to calm. Who has it? The old man laughed bitterly. Do you really think I'm so divine? If I was, then the divine fortune-telling sect wouldn't have fallen to such a state. All I know is that the origin heart isn't in the Green Province's origin heart. As for who has it, I really don't know. High Lord Lu spoke in a low voice. Is there any way to find out? The old man shook his head. That person was able to sneak away with the origin heart under the noses of both your Realm Defense Alliance and the Pale Sword Sect. He is absolutely not an ordinary person. As he spoke, he lay down. Old man Lu, I've told you everything I know. Let's go. Within the hall, High Lord Lu remained silent for a moment before he said, It isn't in the hands of the Pale Sword Sect. The old man shook his head. I don't know. I really don't know who has it. Old man Lu, you should be aware that our Tao of divination is only able to calculate a rough direction. As for the details, not to mention me, even the founding ancestor wouldn't be able to accomplish that. High Lord Lu glanced at the old man, and then he turned around and left. After High Lord Lu left, the old man sighed softly. Your Realm Defense Alliance is probably going to suffer. After High Lord Lu left the Central Divine Prefecture, he directly returned to Pine Prefecture. High above the clouds, High Lord Lu looked down at the desolate mountain range. At this moment, the grand formation around the mountain range had been withdrawn. Mo Xiu spoke in a low voice. Are you sure that the origin heart has been taken? High Lord Lu spoke softly. It should be true. The Pale Sword Sect, asked Mo Xiu. High Lord Lu fell silent for a moment, and then he shook his head. It's impossible for them to seize the origin heart without making a sound. Moreover, if they obtained it, they would definitely destroy it. It's utterly impossible for them to dispatch all their experts to Pine Prefecture. Mo Xiu's brows knit together tightly. If it isn't the Pale Sword Sect, then who could it be? When he spoke up to hear, he seemed to have thought of something, and his expression suddenly changed. High Lord Lu gazed at Mo Xiu when he noticed the change in Mo Xiu's expression. What? Mo Xiu spoke in a low voice. I thought of something. High Lord Lu said, Speak. Mo Xiu's expression was slightly gloomy. Not long ago, I sensed the aura of the origin heart here, and I brought it here. However, when we arrived here, we didn't see the origin heart, and we only saw a person. A person. High Lord Lu frowned slightly. Who? Mo Xiu said, Yi Xian. Yi Xian. High Lord Lu's eyes instantly narrowed slightly when he heard this. Mo Xiu spoke in a low voice. We really did sense the aura of the origin heart that day, but we only saw Yi Xian when we arrived here. At that time, I thought that it was utterly impossible for Yi Xian to obtain the origin heart without making a sound. So, I felt that I might have sensed wrongly. But now it seems like. When he spoke up to hear, he shook his head. That can't be right. Yi Xian is merely the Sword Emperor. It's utterly impossible for him to have taken away the origin heart. Not necessarily. High Lord Lu suddenly spoke coldly. This person has always been mysterious. If it was anyone else, then I would definitely not believe it. Even if it was the Pale Sword Sect, I wouldn't believe it. But I believe this person. Mo Xiu looked at High Lord Lu. High Lord, you think that it's very likely that the Azure Prefecture's origin heart is in Yi Xian's possession? High Lord Lu nodded. If you're not wrong, then it's very likely to be in his possession. Then where is Yi Xian now? Mo Xiu turned around to look at an old man, and the old man spoke in a low voice. He's with the Pale Sword sect now. High Lord Lu spoke indifferently. Gather everyone and follow me. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left, and over 30 true defense realm experts followed behind him. In next to no time, High Lord Lu led the members of the Realm Defense Alliance to a hill on the other side. At the top of the hill, Chen Beihan walked in front of High Lord Lu and smiled. High Lord Lu, why aren't you waiting for the birth of the origin heart? Why are you here? High Lord Lu glanced at Chen Beihan. Where's Yi Xian? Yi Xian? Chen Beihan smiled. Why is High Lord Lu looking for him? High Lord Lu replied indifferently, just a question. Chen Beihan was about to speak when High Lord Lu suddenly interjected. Chen Beihan, I don't want to talk nonsense with you right now. I just want to see Yi Xian. Chen Beihan's smile gradually turned cold. At this time, a voice came from the side. High Lord Lu is looking for me. High Lord Lu turned around and saw a man walking over from not far away. It was Yi Xian. Beside Yi Xian was a woman, Yu Qi. High Lord Lu's gaze fell on Yi Xian. Is the Azure Prefecture's origin heart with you? Azure Prefecture's origin heart? Hearing High Lord Lu's words, Chen Beihan and the others were slightly stunned. Even Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Origin heart? What origin heart? High Lord Lu stared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, don't play dumb in front of the old man. Is the origin heart with you or not? Yi Xian said in a deep voice. High Lord Lu, are you crazy? How can the origin heart be with me? Look at me, do I look like someone with the origin heart? High Lord Lu was about to speak when Chen Beihan suddenly said, High Lord Lu, are you joking? High Lord Lu looked at Chen Beihan, his face extremely cold. Do you think I look like I'm joking? Chen Beihan smiled. Then do you think a mere Dharma-controlling realm like him can obtain the origin heart? If the origin heart is so easy to obtain, would your Realm Defense Alliance go through so much effort? High Lord Lu looked at Yi Xian. He should know whether he obtained it or not. Yi Xian said seriously, High Lord Lu, the origin heart is with me. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. At this moment, Yi Xian grinned. Lord Lu, I'm sure you want to hear this. So, I just said it to make you happy. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Yu Qi shook his head and smiled. Sly. Chen Beihan and the others also couldn't help laughing. At this time, High Lord Lu suddenly walked not far from Yi Xian. He stared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, the origin heart is with you, right? Yi Xian said with a smile, it is with me. High Lord Lu narrowed his eyes. You admit it? Yi Xian smiled. You definitely wouldn't believe me if I said it isn't, so I can only say it is. High Lord Lu stared at Yi Xian for a long time, and then he looked at Chen Beihan. My Realm Defense Alliance is taking this person away. Taking him away. Just this one sentence caused the atmosphere to instantly become tense. Chen Beihan shook his head and smiled. High Lord Lu, you really know how to joke today. High Lord Lu looked Chen Beihan in the eye. I'm not joking with you. My Realm Defense Alliance must take this person away today, and no one can stop us. Chen Beihan smiled. Then I can only say that you're overthinking it, High Lord Lu. Yi Xian is a disciple of my Pale Sword sect. So long as we old fellows are here today, you can forget about taking him away. High Lord Lu nodded slightly. Since that's the case, then let's fight. Chen Beihan smiled. Anytime. At the side, Yi Xian suddenly smiled. High Lord Lu, you haven't asked for my opinion before you want to take me away. High Lord Lu pointed at Yi Xian angrily. Cut the crap, I've been unhappy with you for a long time. Today, even if the person behind you appears, this old man will kill you. As soon as he finished speaking, he directly charged at Yi Xian. Chapter 316. Yi Xian sneered at the sight of Lord Lu's attack. Just as he was about to make his move, Chen Beihan suddenly stood in front of him. Chen Beihan looked at Lu Xun with a cold smile. Lu Xun, aren't you ashamed to bully a junior? Let me play with you. As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward and pointed a finger at them. Swoosh! A flying sword flew out from his sleeve. It was so fast that Yi Xian couldn't catch the flying sword's trajectory. Sword Immortal. Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat. Only a flying sword like this could be considered a real flying sword. Opposite Chen Beihan, Lu Xun waved his hand and a wave shield suddenly appeared in front of him. Boom! Heaven and earth suddenly trembled. Chen Beihan's flying sword was blocked. Chen Beihan glanced at the shield in front of Lu Xun and smiled. Come to think of it, this should be Lu Xun's Yuanin shield. Lu Xun glanced at Chen Beihan indifferently. Now, if your pale sword sect hands over Yi Xian, we can temporarily stop fighting. If your pale sword sect really wants to protect him, then you can accompany him in death. Chen Beihan smiled. Do you think I'm scared? Lu Xun narrowed his eyes. If that's the case, then accompany him in death. Dozens of people suddenly appeared in the surroundings. All of them were true Imperial Dharma realm. Behind Chen Beihan, 17 people also appeared. Among them, Yi Xian saw some familiar faces such as Zhang Tai, Gu Shishu, Yu Qi, Zhang Xian, and some he didn't know. However, these people were all true Imperial Dharma realm experts. Yi Xian's face sank because he didn't see great uncle Jian Xian. In the air, Lu Xun looked down at Chen Beihan. Come, let me see how much a great sword immortal has improved after so many years. Chen Beihan smiled. As you wish. He turned into a sword light and soared into the sky. Below, Yu Qi turned his head and glanced at Yi Xian not far away. Stand down. Yi Xian hesitated and was about to speak when Yu Qi said, Stand down. This time, his voice was a little stern. Yi Xian grinned. All right. With that, he turned around and left. In the sky, several experts of the Realm Protection Alliance directly chased after Yi Xian, but very quickly, Yu Qi and the others rose from the ground and directly blocked in front of them. The battle began. High above the clouds, Lord Lu and Chen Beihan looked at each other from afar, both expressionless. Supremacy Lu suddenly extended his right hand. In an instant, the clouds beneath him began to gather towards his palm. Not long after, a huge cloud vortex appeared beneath him. In the distance, Chen Beihan's right thumb, ring finger, and pinky suddenly bent. In the next moment, a sword howl resounded from within his sleeve. Supremacy Lu said coldly, Come, let me see the sword in your sleeve. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly spread out his right hand. In the next moment, the huge cloud vortex suddenly shrank into a palm-sized vortex in the center of his palm. In the blink of an eye, he suddenly slapped his palm toward Chen Beihan who was opposite him. As soon as his palm hit, the space within a radius of 1,000 zhang suddenly became illusory. At the same time, a huge cloud palm print shuttled through the sky. It was faster than lightning. Not only that, but wherever this cloud palm print passed, the space directly twisted into a twisted shape. Opposite Supremacy Lu, Chen Beihan suddenly pointed forward with a finger. From his sleeve, a sword suddenly flew out, and a sword light appeared. Buzz. A sword howl suddenly resounded through the sky. At the same time, the sword light soared into the sky, and in an instant, this sword light directly covered the entire sky. Boom! A shocking explosion suddenly resounded in the sky, and the space within a few thousand zhang trembled as if it was about to collapse. It was extremely terrifying. A true expert. Somewhere below, Yi Xian's blood was boiling as he watched. At this moment, he finally realized that Supremacy Lu was actually so strong, and with his current strength, it was impossible for him to go against Supremacy Lu. Moreover, it was the first time he'd seen such a battle. This kind of expert could really destroy the heavens and extinguish the earth. Although he'd seen the mysterious woman fight before, every time she attacked, it wasn't earth-shattering, and it was always a matter of a single move. Above the clouds, Chen Beihan glanced at the distant Supremacy Lu and said indifferently, "What a great move." Supremacy Lu's face was expressionless. "After so many years, your sword in the sleeve has improved a lot." Chen Beihan smiled, "Then let's continue." As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward. In an instant, over 100 energy swords suddenly appeared behind him. Chen Beihan pressed his fingers together and pointed at Supremacy Lu, "Go." As soon as he spoke, the 100 energy swords shot out, and in an instant, the entire layer of clouds in the sky was instantly torn into pieces by the energy swords. At the same time, rays of dazzling sword light blotted out the sky and covered the entire horizon. On the other side, Supremacy Lu's face was expressionless. He stretched out his right hand, and it didn't take long for an illusory shield to suddenly appear in his palm. In the next moment, the illusory shield expanded with the wind and instantly reached a height of over 100 zhang. Ripples kept appearing on the surface of this huge shield, like ripples on water. Soon, the energy swords slashed down. Boom! 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 Deafening explosions resounded in the sky once more. At this moment, the clouds in the sky shook violently, and cracks even appeared in the space in some places. Just like that, the explosions continued for a very, very long time before the sky gradually calmed down. This person clenched his fists tightly and said fiercely, "Who is it? Come out, old man." There was no response. At this moment, Yu Qi, who was not far away, suddenly drew his sword. The two's expressions changed slightly as they hurriedly turned around. The moment they turned around, a sword silently pierced through the back of the old man who had just spoken. Qi! Fresh blood spurted out from the old man's neck. Chapter 317. The surroundings suddenly fell silent. The other old man looked around in horror. At this moment, his heart was already extremely shocked. Because the old man had died right beside him, but he hadn't discovered who had done it. It wasn't just him, even Yu Qi was slightly taken aback. Who was it? In her impression, the Blue Sword sect did not have any assassins. And at this time, 100 zhang away, the head of a true defending magic realm expert of the Realm Protection Alliance suddenly flew off. Blood gushed out like a fountain. After a few breaths, 200 feet to the right, a true control Dharma realm cultivator of the Realm Defense Alliance was pierced through the heart by a sword. Just like that, in less than a dozen breaths of time, 5 experts from the Realm Defense Alliance had perished. At this moment, all the experts of the Realm Defense Alliance panicked. They weren't afraid of fighting in the open, but they had to be afraid of this kind of dirty trick in the dark. Because it was impossible to guard against. Furthermore, it was so mysterious. There was no trace of it at all. In next to no time, the experts of the Realm Defense Alliance stopped in succession and moved closer to each other. At this moment, they didn't just have to face the experts of the Pale Sword sect, they also had to be on guard against those hidden in the shadows. It could be said that they were too distracted, so their strength was greatly reduced. As a result, the Realm Protection Alliance was at a complete disadvantage. Seeing that the situation was not good, Mo Xiu hurriedly informed Supreme Lord Lu. However, he did not receive a reply. This was because Chen Beihan had pinned down Supremacy Lu. Neither of them dared to be distracted in their battle. One moment of carelessness and he would be consigned to eternal damnation. The members of the Pale Sword sect were stunned as well because they didn't know who was helping them from the shadows. But it didn't matter, it was a good thing anyway. On the desolate mountain range, the battle was still ongoing. However, the Realm Defense Alliance was completely suppressed and could only passively defend. In the sky, the battle between Lord Lu and Chen Beihan was still going on, and there was still no clear winner. In the dark, Yi Xian did not attack again because the experts of the Realm Protection Alliance had already gathered together. If he were to attack now, they would definitely join hands to deal with him first. Now, he could only wait for the right opportunity. In any case, it was the Realm Protection Alliance that should be anxious. Just like that, the experts of the Realm Defense Alliance died one after another. Although the Pale Sword sect had also sacrificed some people, it was far less than the Realm Defense Alliance. An hour later, a deafening explosion suddenly resounded in the sky above the clouds. Very quickly, two figures fell from the sky and landed on the ground. Boom! The entire ground shook violently, and the place where the two of them landed directly collapsed. Everyone stopped and looked at Lord Lu and Chen Beihan. If a victor was decided between the two of them, it would mean that the battle was about to end. On the ground, Chen Beihan waved his sleeves, then looked at Supremacy Lu, who was not far away, and said with a smile, "Supremacy Lu, I'm afraid it won't take a few days and nights for us to fight to the death." Supremacy Lu stared fixedly at Chen Beihan with a malevolent expression. "If you don't hand over Yi Xian, I guarantee you that your Pale Sword sect will be annihilated." Chen Beihan smiled and said, "Your Realm Defense Alliance has been trying to destroy my Pale Sword sect for a long time. But, my Pale Sword sect is still doing fine, isn't it?" Supremacy Lu sneered, "Chen Beihan, you will pay a painful price for your foolish actions." With that, he swept his eyes around. "Yi Xian, I know you're hiding in the dark. Let me tell you, if you don't hand over the Origin Heart, my Realm Defense Alliance will hunt you down for eternity. No one will be able to protect you." With that, he looked at Chen Beihan. "Just you wait." With that, the group of people turned and left. A moment later, all the experts of the Realm Defense Alliance disappeared into the horizon. Below, Chen Beihan looked up at the sky. No one knew what he was thinking. A moment later, he suddenly said, "Where's Yi Xian?" "I'm here." At this time, a voice suddenly sounded from afar. Everyone looked over and saw that it was Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian was grinning, but no one knew what he was smiling about. Seeing Yi Xian, everyone shook their heads and smiled. This guy was really slippery at times. Yi Xian walked over to Chen Beihan and bowed slightly. "Sect leader." Chen Beihan nodded slightly. "Come with me." With that, he walked into the distance. Yi Xian hurriedly followed. Beside him, Yu Qi hesitated for a moment, but also followed. On a hill, Chen Beihan stared at Yi Xian. "Is the Origin Heart with you?" Yi Xian nodded. Seeing this, Yu Qi couldn't help but glance at Yi Xian. She wanted to say something, but in the end, she didn't say anything. Chen Beihan's expression became slightly complicated. The Realm Defense Alliance went through so much trouble to obtain the Origin Heart, but I didn't expect it to fall into your hands in the end." Yi Xian said with a smile, "Fate." Chen Beihan hesitated for a moment, and then said, "I want to destroy this Origin Heart to avoid future troubles." "Destroy it?" Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head. "No, no." At the thought of destroying Shaoling, Yi Xian really couldn't bear to do it, but he couldn't do it. Although that girl was a bit mischievous, she wasn't a bad person. Chen Beihan glanced at Yi Xian. "If I don't destroy it, I'm afraid something big will happen in the future." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "Sect leader, the Origin Heart is only willing to follow me because I promised to protect it. If I want to destroy it now, I can't do it. As a person, I have to be trustworthy, right?" Chen Beihan was silent for a moment, and then asked, "It followed you willingly?" Yi Xian nodded. Chen Beihan looked deeply at Yi Xian. Needless to say, he was still slightly shocked at this moment. Because he'd truly never imagined that the Qingzhou's Origin Heart would actually follow Yi Xian. It should be known that this kind of spiritual object, in general, was very resistant to humans. Mysterious. The feeling he got from Yi Xian had always been one of mystery. A short moment later, Chen Beihan spoke in a low voice. "The Realm Defense Alliance should have guessed that it's you, and they won't let the matter rest. You must return to Pale Sword Sect with me." Yu Qi nodded, "Yes." Chen Beihan continued, "If you stay in Qingzhou, then you won't be able to protect yourself at all. I'll give you half a day to deal with the matter in Qingzhou. It's best if you make those friends of yours go into hiding or return to Pale Sword Sect with me. When he spoke up to hear, there was a trace of worry in his eyes. For the sake of this origin heart, the Realm Defense Alliance will definitely do anything. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, and then he said, if I go to Pale Sword Sect, then the Realm Defense Alliance will definitely act madly against Pale Sword Sect. This, Chen Beihan shook his head, you're already a disciple of my Pale Sword Sect, so your matters are naturally my Pale Sword Sect's matters. Moreover, even without you, once the Realm Defense Alliance achieves its objective, they still won't let my Pale Sword Sect off. Quickly go deal with your own matters, and we'll return to the Central Divine Prefecture in half a day. Yi Xian intended to say something else when Yu Qi suddenly said, quickly go. Don't waste any time. Yi Xian smiled, and then he turned around and left. After Yi Xian left, Chen Beihan spoke softly, I never expected that the origin heart would actually fall into his hands. Yu Qi gazed at Chen Beihan, don't use him. Chen Beihan shook his head and smiled, little junior sister, do you think your second senior brother, is such a heartless person in your heart? Yu Qi spoke softly, he isn't a bad person. If he's willing to stay in my Pale Sword Sect, then his accomplishments in the future wouldn't be inferior to eldest senior brothers. Chen Beihan nodded, I know. That kid's biggest problem is that he acts on impulse. If he doesn't manage the affairs of the sect and wholeheartedly cultivates, then his accomplishments in the future will definitely not be inferior to eldest senior brothers. But if he becomes the next sect master, then I'm afraid he'll lead the Pale Sword Sect to fight every day. Yu Qi shook her head slightly. She had a rough understanding of Yi Xian's character, and he really wasn't an ordinary kind of irritable person. Even though he usually laughed and laughed, was thick-skinned, and sometimes even schemed a little, but if he was infuriated, then he would erupt like a volcano. Chen Beihan suddenly said, forget it, these are matters for the future. It's too early to talk about it now. As he spoke, he looked at Yu Qi, do you know who attacked from the shadows earlier? Yu Qi shook her head. Chen Beihan nodded and didn't say anything. On the other hand, Yu Qi glanced in the direction that Yi Xian had left in. After leaving the desolate mountain range, Yi Xian returned to Ning Kingdom at the first possible moment. In Tuoba Yan's chamber. Tuoba Yan looked at Yi Xian and frowned slightly, hide? Yi Xian nodded, both of you must. Otherwise, both of you can come with me to the Pale Sword Sect. Tuoba Yan and Ji Anji exchanged glances. In the end, Tuoba Yan spoke solemnly, is it very serious? Yi Xian nodded, very serious. The Realm Defense Alliance is probably going to fight me to the death this time. Just as Chen Beihan had said, he could sense how much the Realm Defense Alliance valued the origin heart. However, it was absolutely impossible for him to hand it over to the Realm Defense Alliance. Because even if he did, the Realm Defense Alliance wouldn't let him and the Pale Sword Sect off. Moreover, if he did hand it over to the Realm Defense Alliance, then who knew what terrifying things the Realm Defense Alliance would use it to do. So, he and the Realm Defense Alliance were irreconcilable enemies now. Tuoba Yen fell silent for a moment, and then he said, I want to stay here. However, Enji and I will go into hiding. Yi Xian spoke softly, you don't want to go to the Pale Sword Sect with me? Tuoba Yen shook his head, if we leave just like this, then what will happen to Ning Country? Even though I will have to hide if I stay here, I can manage Ning Country in secret. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he nodded, all right. However, both of you must not show yourselves. Besides that, notify the others of Blue Waves Academy to not show themselves. Tuoba Yen looked at Yi Xian, you have to be careful, understand? Yi Xian smiled, don't worry, I won't die. As soon as he finished speaking, he hugged Tuoba Yen lightly, wait for me to return. As soon as he finished speaking, he seemed to have thought of something, and he hugged Ji Anji once more before turning around and leaving. You will definitely return, right? Tuoba Yen asked. Yi Xian stopped and smiled, wait for me. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished through the door. Within the hall, Tuoba Yen stared at the door for a long time and didn't leave. Half a day later, a huge event occurred in Firmament World. The Realm Defense Alliance declared war on the Pale Sword Sect. Chapter 318. The Realm Defense Alliance had declared war on the Pale Sword Sect. Before this, although the two families had already started fighting, they did not openly declare war on each other. But this time, the Realm Defense Alliance had declared war. This meant that both sides had no other choice but to fight to the death. As for Yi Xian, he followed Shen Beihan and the others back to the Pale Sword Sect. At this moment, the Pale Sword Sect had entered the highest level of alert. All the disciples were on standby. Because the Realm Defense Alliance could attack at any time. Cloudsword Peak. Yi Xian was helping Yu Qi tidy up the sword techniques and notes in the inner hall. What Yu Qi did every day was to study these sword techniques, make notes, and sometimes improve them. One had to admit that following Yu Qi really did allow one to learn many things every day. As for Yi Xian, he wasn't always at the Cloudy Sword Hall. The current him was already familiar with the Blue Sword Sect. From time to time, he would stroll around here and there. Every day, he was very carefree. But after returning to the Central Divine Continent, the Realm Defense Alliance was strangely calm, without the slightest movement. Realm Defense Mountain. High Lord Lu arrived at the rear hall. There was a black vortex in the rear hall, and within it was a boundless starry sky. High Lord Lu walked up to the vortex and bowed slightly. "My lord." A moment later, a voice came from within. "Failed?" High Lord Lu nodded. "Failed, but I know who has it." After a moment of silence, the voice suddenly said, "At all costs, understand?" High Lord Lu nodded slightly. "I might need my lord's help when the time comes. There is a mysterious woman behind that person who once told my lord. She's no ordinary person. If she appears..." "Didn't I give you a clone?" the voice asked. High Lord Lu smiled bitterly. He wanted to say that this clone was far from enough, but he didn't dare say it. After hesitating for a moment, High Lord Lu nodded. "Understood, but I'm worried that the mysterious woman isn't ordinary and has some other power behind her. So, just in case, I ask my lord to give me another clone." The voice said, "I've only managed to cultivate 2 clones. I've given one to you, but I have other uses for the other one. If you don't have the confidence, I'll let my left and right protectors come and assist you." Hearing this, Lord Lu quickly nodded. "That's great. Apart from that, I would also like to request for a group of golden guards. I only need 10 of them." After a moment of silence, the voice said, "Approved." Supremacy Lu heaved a sigh of relief. This way, the Grey Mia Sword Sect would be more confident. In the endless starry sky, a star cloud ship suddenly stopped. Not far away from this star cloud ship was an ancient city, and in the sky above the ancient city, there were 3 large words, Realm Defense Alliance. On the nebula warship stood an old man and a middle-aged man. The middle-aged man glanced at the ancient city in the distance and said softly, "This star field is under the control of the Realm Protection Alliance?" The old man nodded. This Realm Protection Alliance was not simple in the past. Its founder was just an ordinary young man, but he created a new cultivation method. This method was the power of faith. The more devout the people's faith in him, the stronger his martial Tao was. Unfortunately. Saying this, he shook his head and sighed. After that person, no other amazing talent appeared in the Realm Protection Alliance. As a result, its power is not as great as before. Now, it can only be considered a third-rate faction. The middle-aged man smiled. "This has nothing to do with us. Our mission this time is to find that young man. To find a person in this vast star field is more than 100 times harder than finding a needle in a haystack. Our Spirit Void Star Palace is really unlucky this time." Hearing this, the old man smiled bitterly. There's nothing we can do. That mysterious woman descended from the sky and found us. Who told us that we can't beat her? Hearing the old man's words, the middle-aged man smiled bitterly. They couldn't beat her. They couldn't beat her at all. That mysterious woman's strength had completely exceeded their understanding. A moment later, the middle-aged man said softly, "Let's go." As his voice sounded out, the Star Cloud ship flew above the Realm Protection City. Soon, a black-clothed old man appeared before the Star Cloud ship. The black-clothed old man looked warily at the middle-aged man and the old man. "You two are?" The middle-aged man smiled. "I am Spirit Void Star Palace's Lin Songyun. This is my Spirit Void Star Palace's enforcer, Qin Zhen." Spirit Void Star Palace? The black-clothed old man frowned deeply. "I've never heard of it." Lin Songyun smiled. "My Spirit Void Star Palace is too far from this star field. It's normal that you have never heard of it." As he spoke, he released his powerful aura. Beside him, Qin Zhen also released his aura. Seeing the two's auras, the black-clothed old man's expression changed. "You too," Lin Songyun smiled. "We have no ill intentions. We just want to ask your Realm Protection Alliance for a small favor." "A small favor?" The black-clothed old man hesitated for a moment before saying, "What favor?" Lin Songyun said in a low voice, "To find someone." As he spoke, he waved his right hand and a portrait appeared in front of the black-clothed old man. If Yi Xian was here, he would definitely be shocked because the person in the portrait looked exactly like him. The black-clothed old man said in a low voice, "Do you have an exact location?" Lin Songyun shook his head. "No." Hearing this, the black-clothed old man shook his head. "It's too difficult." Lin Songyun smiled bitterly. "The two of us know that it's too difficult, but there's nothing we can do about it. This person is extremely important to my Spirit Void Star Palace. Please help us." The black-clothed old man glanced at the two of them. He hesitated for a moment before nodding. "I will send people to search." However, the old man cannot guarantee that he will definitely be found. Lin Songyun smiled. "Thank you very much." As he spoke, he looked down. "The two of us would like to stay here for a period of time. Is that convenient?" The black-clothed old man smiled. "Of course." As he spoke, he hesitated for a moment before saying, "My Realm Defense Alliance is about to go to war with another power. If it's convenient for the two of you, I hope that you can lend us a hand. What do you think?" Lin Songyun and Lin Songyun looked at each other. Lin Songyun smiled. "Of course." However, the matter of finding someone, the black-clothed old man said seriously, "Don't worry. My Realm Defense Alliance will do its best to find that person. If that person is in this star region, then my Realm Defense Alliance will definitely be able to find him." Lin Songyun smiled. "Thank you very much." The black-clothed old man smiled lightly. "Please follow me." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned and left. His face was filled with a smile. Lin Songyun and Qin Zhen were obviously not ordinary experts. When the two of them participated in the battle, the Firmament Sword sect would definitely be destroyed. When he thought of this, the black-clothed old man's smile grew even brighter, and he became even more courteous towards Lin Songyun and Qin Zhen. The Firmament World. Yi Xian strolled around here and there every day. In the end, he arrived at the Sword Tomb. When the old man who guarded the Sword Tomb saw Yi Xian, his eyelids twitched, and he hurriedly stood in front of Yi Xian and said cautiously, "What are you doing?" He hadn't forgotten that Yi Xian had devoured many swords when he came here, and there were even heaven-grade swords among them. This fellow can devour swords. Yi Xian chuckled. "Nothing, I'm just here to stroll around." The old man said indifferently, "There's nothing to stroll around here. Go back." Yi Xian said seriously, "I'm just going in for a stroll." I have no other intentions. The old man glanced at Yi Xian with an expressionless face. No. Yi Xian sighed softly. He had no choice but to turn around and leave. Actually, he could sneak in silently, but it would be too boring to do that. Heaven-grade swords. What he needed the most right now was a heaven-grade sword. As long as he had a heaven-grade sword, he could enter the true defense realm at any time. Once he entered the true defense realm, his strength would definitely increase greatly. Other than that, he had yet to condense the Sword of Space. Other than the World Prison Pagoda, his strongest attack was the Sword of Earth. If he could successfully condense the Sword of Earth and use life and death in one sword, he was 90% confident that he could instantly kill a true defense realm powerhouse. The Tao of Space was clearly above the Tao of Earth. If he could condense the Sword of Space, it would definitely be even more powerful. But now, he wasn't confident that he could condense the Sword of Space. Because his cultivation level wasn't high enough. He had to reach the true defense realm. And he needed swords. Where could he find swords? The sword tomb was out of the question. This was because this place was the accumulation of the Pale Sword sect. If those swords were left there, they could improve the swordsmanship of the Pale Sword sect disciples. He definitely couldn't let him continue devouring. He had to think of something else. Who was he thinking of? Yi Xian thought for a moment. Soon, he came to Weapon Forging Peak. Sword Dao Yi Xian. Zhang Tai said impatiently, "What are you doing here again?" Yi Xian grinned, "I'm here to pay my respects to Uncle Master Zhang." Scram. Zhang Tai waved his hand, "Scram quickly, I have nothing here." After he finished speaking, he turned around and disappeared on the spot. Yi Xian, a moment later, Yi Xian came to Array Dao Peak. Inside the hall, Yi Xian walked to Uncle Master Gu and bowed, "Greetings, Uncle Master Gu." Uncle Master Gu glanced at Yi Xian, "What's the matter?" Yi Xian hesitated, "There's something, but it's a little hard to say." Uncle Master Gu said indifferently, "Then don't say it." Yi Xian's face darkened. Why didn't this Uncle Master Gu play by the rules? After hesitating for a moment, he said, "I want a heaven-grade sword." Uncle Master Gu glanced at him, "There's only one. I'll use it myself, do you want it?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly, how could he want it? He bowed slightly, then turned and left. At this moment, Uncle Master Gu suddenly said, "Go find your master, she has a way." Yi Xian was stunned, then he hurriedly flew out of the hall. Soon, he returned to Cloud Sword Peak. In the hall, Yu Qi was silent for a moment, then she turned and walked into the inner hall. After a while, she walked out again, waved her right hand, and two swords landed steadily in front of him. Heaven-grade sword. Yi Xian was stunned, then he said embarrassedly, Still, isn't it enough?" Yu Qi asked. Yi Xian hurriedly nodded. He could be thick-skinned to everyone, but when it came to Yu Qi, he really couldn't be thick-skinned. Yu Qi was silent for a moment, then she said, "Follow me." After saying that, she brought Yi Xian to the sword tomb. Seeing Yi Xian, the old guard of the sword tomb was stunned, but he ignored Yi Xian and looked at Yu Qi with a somewhat kind expression, "Little junior sister, why are you here today?" Yu Qi said indifferently, "Give me a few heaven-grade swords." The old man glanced at Yi Xian, a little hesitant. "Is there a problem?" Yu Qi asked. The old man hurriedly said, "No problem, I'll go get it for you." After saying that, he turned and left. At the side, Yi Xian was dumbfounded. P.S. Actually, I know many people have been dissatisfied recently, because there are fewer updates. But, to be honest, everyone has a holiday for the new year, but what we write really doesn't have a holiday. It's year-round, it's not an excuse, I just want to explain to my friends who understand. After all, it's the new year, and I'm still in the hospital, now waiting for my father's wound to heal. I don't know how long it will take. If you can understand, then understand, but if you can't, then scold. Thank you. Chapter 319. In a short while, the old man walked out of the sword tomb with a box in his hand. The old man passed the box to Wuxia. She opened it and saw 4 swords. All of them were heaven grade. Wuxia turned around and passed the box to Yixian. Is it enough? Is it enough? The old man's eyes twitched when he heard Wuxia's words. Yixian thought about it and said, it should be enough. Wuxia turned to look at the old man. Give me another one. The old man was speechless. Yixian was speechless. A moment later, the old man took out another one. It was also a heaven-grade sword. Thus, Yixian obtained 5 swords in one go. Wuxia didn't say anything and just turned around and left. Yixian was silent for a long time before he grinned. This master is really nice. He felt very warm in his heart. Wuxia didn't ask what he wanted the swords for. This was trust. This feeling of being trusted and believed in was really good. The old man glanced at Yixian with an ugly expression. He didn't say anything and just turned around and left. Yixian had to admit that he was a little emotional at the moment. He didn't know why Wuxia wanted so many heaven-grade swords, but he knew that without Wuxia, he definitely wouldn't be able to obtain so many heaven-grade swords. At this moment, he realized why so many people wanted to join some big powers. Because big powers really had a lot of resources, and they were very good. If he was still an independent cultivator, even if he had 10 billion top-grade spirit stones, he wouldn't be able to buy 5 heaven-grade swords. It's good to have an organization and a backer. It's too tiring to fight alone. I have to find more backers in the future. Yixian grinned, turned around, and left with the sword in his arms. Yixian returned to his room on Cloud Sword Peak and then entered the prison pagoda. Devour. Inside the prison pagoda, as soon as she saw Yixian enter, Xiaolinger hurriedly put away the box. She looked at Yixian warily. I didn't do anything. Yixian was speechless. Thinking that Yixian didn't believe her, she quickly added, I really didn't do anything. All right. Yixian waved his hand, I know, you didn't do anything. Now, I want to cultivate, don't disturb me, understand? Little Ling nodded her little head, not really understanding. Yixian sat cross-legged on the ground, then took out a heaven-rank sword and stabbed it into his chest. Upon seeing this, Xiaolinger's eyes widened in shock. She covered her mouth with her small hands in shock. Once the heaven-grade sword entered his body, a powerful energy immediately spread out from his body. Soon, his body began to absorb this energy frantically. Invincible sword body. He remembered that the mysterious woman had once said that if he cultivated this technique to the end, his body would be like a sword, and no sword could penetrate it. As for when he would be able to cultivate to the end, he didn't know. In any case, he just had to cultivate first. At the side, Xiaolinger was dumbfounded. She flew around Yixian, touching Yixian from time to time. Her eyes were filled with curiosity. As if she had thought of something, she suddenly floated to the box in front of Yixian. Then, she grabbed at the air with her 2 small hands. Soon, a sword slowly floated up. Then, under her control, the sword was pointed at herself. Just as the sword was about to stab down, a force suddenly enveloped Xiaolinger. Xiaolinger was stunned. At this time, a voice sounded from the first floor, What are you doing? It was the voice of the god on the second floor. Xiaolinger blinked. Playing. Who plays like you? The voice of the god on the second floor was a little harsh. Xiaolinger pointed at Yixian. He plays too. The god on the second floor was speechless. At this time, Xiaolinger suddenly floated to the second floor and saw the god on the second floor. Around the body of the second floor great god, there were strange golden runes. These runes were like ropes that trapped the second floor great god. Xiaolinger floated in front of the god on the second floor, giggling. Then, she took out a spirit fruit and handed it to the god on the second floor. The god on the second floor glanced at Xiao Linger and didn't say anything. Xiao Linger hesitated for a moment, then said, "The guy on the fourth floor asked me to pull out the 3 swords at the top of the tower to play. Can I pull them out?" Hearing this, the god on the second floor's eyes twitched. Azure Sword Hall. There were only 3 people in the hall, Chen Beihan, Zhang Xian, and Zhang Tai. Chen Beihan looked at Zhang Xian. Still no movement from the Realm Defense Alliance? Zhang Xian shook his head. No. But according to my guess, it won't be long before they make a big move. Chen Beihan nodded slightly. The Celestial Sect of Wonders and the few sects in the upper world have not responded? Zhang Xian smiled bitterly. If it doesn't affect their interests, why would they make a move? Moreover, at this time, everyone can't wait for our Azure Sword sect to fight to the death with the Realm Defense Alliance so they can reap the benefits. Chen Beihan said softly, "It seems that our Azure Sword sect can only rely on ourselves this time." As he spoke, he paused for a moment before continuing, "I'll have to trouble junior sister Gu for the next few days. Ask her to fix the 2 formations, especially the one left behind by the Ancestral Master. She must fix it. This matter is urgent." Zhang Xian nodded. "I understand. Junior sister Gu should also understand. She has been busy with this matter recently." Chen Beihan suddenly asked, "What about eldest senior brother?" Eldest senior brother. Hearing this, Zhang Xian's and Zhang Tai's expressions changed subtly. Zhang Xian smiled bitterly. Of course, after he sent Shang Yu and Bo Yi back to the sect, there was no news of him. But if our Azure Sword sect is in trouble, he will definitely help. Chen Beihan nodded. Of course, he went to the demon race because he doesn't want Shang Yu to die there. He is afraid that our Azure Sword sect will have no successor. As for him, let's not bother about him for the time being. He will definitely appear when it's time. Zhang Xian smiled. That's true. Now that the war between our Azure Sword sect and the Realm Defense Alliance is imminent, there's no way he won't appear. Chen Beihan said softly, "I just don't know what trump card the Realm Defense Alliance has this time. This battle concerns the life and death of our Azure Sword sect." Hearing this, Zhang Xian's and Zhang Tai's expressions turned grave. Life and death. If Azure Sword sect lost this battle, there was no need for the Realm Defense Alliance to take action. The other forces of the Divine Central Continent would completely devour Azure Sword sect. The Azure Sword sect couldn't afford to lose this battle. A moment later, Chen Beihan said in a low voice, "If necessary, tell Yi Xian, Shang Yu, Nangong and the others to leave. No matter what happens to us, Azure Sword sect cannot be destroyed." Zhang Xian nodded. Understood. Any force would leave behind a few seeds. Chen Beihan slowly closed his eyes, while Zhang Xian and Zhang Tai got up and left. Only Chen Beihan was left in the hall. A moment later, a black-robed man suddenly appeared in the hall. The black-robed man glanced at Chen Beihan and shook his head. Chen Beihan said softly, "Never mind, there's no need to investigate. Since I have chosen to believe, I can only believe until the end." The black-robed man nodded and quietly left. Cloud Sword Peak. Inside the prison pagoda, Yi Xian was still frantically devouring. He had already devoured 3 heaven-class swords. The aura around his body was growing stronger and stronger. Inside the prison pagoda, some people were happy while others were worried. The happy one was naturally Xiao Linger. She was unrestrained every day and could stroll around the pagoda as she pleased. There was even food to eat. The worried one was the god on the second floor. Because Yi Xian had activated the prison pagoda time and time again, the seal on the prison pagoda was weakening. Logically speaking, she should be happy because the loosening of the seal was beneficial to her. But she knew very well that if the seal in the pagoda completely disappeared, the people in the pagoda would definitely kill Yi Xian first. Once he was killed, no one in the pagoda would survive. In the entire pagoda, only 2 people knew of the mysterious woman's existence. One was her, and the other was the other. However, the other party was very arrogant and had threatened to find the mysterious woman for revenge. From her point of view, this was a joke. The strength displayed by the mysterious woman was just the tip of the iceberg. Moreover, according to her guess, the reason the prison pagoda had fallen into such a state was probably related to the mysterious woman. They actually didn't know when the mysterious woman had come to the prison pagoda. This was because when they were imprisoned, the prison pagoda was in perfect condition. The seal at that time could make them sleep forever until they died. Therefore, even the people in the pagoda didn't know what had happened to the prison pagoda to turn out like this. All they knew was that when they woke up, the prison pagoda was heavily damaged and the seal was weakening. Moreover, it had a master, and this master was King weak. To put it simply, other than the god on the 2nd floor and the person who was being suppressed by the mysterious woman, no one else knew that there was such a powerful person behind Yi Xian. The pagoda would break, Yi Xian would die, and before long, everyone would die with him. After a moment, the god on the 2nd floor looked at Yi Xian, who was on the 1st floor. Right now, Yi Xian's aura had reached an extremely powerful level. If this aura was outside, it would definitely cause a commotion. But in the prison pagoda, no matter how strong his aura was, it would be suppressed by the pagoda. Days passed in this way. On the 3rd day, Yi Xian, sitting on the ground with his legs crossed, suddenly opened his eyes. Swoosh swoosh. 2 rays of sword light suddenly shot out like lightning. At the same time, a powerful aura suddenly emitted from his body. Yi Xian waved his right hand and the aura suddenly disappeared without a trace. Disintegration. Spatial flying sword. True defense realm. Finally, he had reached the true defense realm. Inside the pagoda, Yi Xian took a deep breath. At this moment, he felt like his body was filled with power. Not only that, but at this moment, his mental energy and divine sense were vastly different from before. It was as if everything around him had become clearer. Moreover, he could clearly sense space. As long as he wanted to, he could change the space around him at any time. It was a very casual kind of change. True defense realm. The corner of Yi Xian's lips curled up slightly. Now, he had finally reached the true defense realm. However, Yi Xian still had one question. Was he a sword immortal? Chapter 320. Now, as long as he was willing, his sword will could transform into heaven and earth. However, whether this was a sword immortal or not, he still did not know. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian decided to ask Yu Qi. At this time, the voice of the god on the 2nd floor suddenly sounded in his mind. Be careful of the one on the 4th floor. The 4th floor? Yi Xian was stunned. What do you mean? The god on the 2nd floor said, it asked Xiao Linger to pull out the sword. Pull out the sword. Hearing this, Yi Xian's face suddenly darkened. Pull out the sword. It must be the sword at the top of the tower. If those swords were pulled out, who knew what would happen? Yi Xian hurriedly called Xiao Linger in front of him. He said seriously, the guy on the 4th floor, it asked you to pull out the sword? Xiao Linger nibbled on a spirit fruit, then nodded her little head. Yes, it said the sword is fun. Yi Xian said seriously, what do you think? Xiao Linger looked at Yi Xian, blinked eye, as she said this, her eyeballs rolled. At this time, Yi Xian said, don't lie. Xiao Linger hesitated, then giggled, I want to pull it out and play with it, then put it back, can. Yi Xian was speechless, what do you think? Xiao Linger suddenly clapped her hands, her eyes lit up, you agree? Yi Xian was dumbfounded, did he agree? At this time, Xiao Linger directly flew out, then climbed to the top of the tower. Yi Xian hurriedly dragged her back. Looking at the little one in front of him, Yi Xian was speechless. How did this little one understand his words? Yi Xian took a deep breath, then said seriously, that sword, you can't pull it out, understand? He did not know whether Xiaolinger could pull it out, but what if she could? If it was pulled out, it would be a big problem. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Xiaolinger blinked and asked curiously, why not? Yi Xian said solemnly, if we pull it out, something big will happen. Oh, little Ling nodded her little head, looking as if she understood. Seeing Xiaolinger nod, Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief. At this time, she said, if I can't pull it out today, can I pull it out tomorrow? Yi Xian nearly fainted when he heard that. Why did this little guy keep thinking about drawing his sword? In the end, Yi Xian was completely defeated by this little fellow. He didn't care about this little guy anymore. He could only ask the second floor's god to pay more attention to this little guy. If he didn't get killed by the Realm Protection Alliance, he would be toyed to death by this little fellow. After leaving the World Prison Pagoda, Yi Xian came to the Cloudy Sword Hall. Inside the hall, Yu Qi was studying a sword technique. Her brows were slightly furrowed as if she was thinking about something. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, Yu Qi suddenly said, what's the matter? Yi Xian nodded. Speak. I suspect I'm a sword immortal. Yu Qi put down the scroll in her hand and turned to look at Yi Xian, sword immortal? Yi Xian nodded, just a suspicion. I'm not sure. Yu Qi walked in front of Yi Xian and looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian moved his mind and in an instant, the entire room was filled with his good and evil sword intent. Seeing this scene, Yu Qi was stunned. Yi Xian asked softly, is it a sword immortal? Yu Qi glanced at Yi Xian and shook her head, not completely, only half. Half. Yi Xian. At this time, Yu Qi suddenly said, true imperial law realm? In her eyes, there was a trace of disbelief. Yi Xian grinned, that's the use of the 5 swords. Yu Qi looked deeply at Yi Xian and said softly, I still underestimated you. With that, she pulled Yi Xian's arm and immediately left the Cloudy Sword Hall. Under Yu Qi's lead, Yi Xian came to the back mountain of the Cloudy Sword Peak. Yi Xian had also been to this back mountain before. There was a bamboo forest and a sea of flowers, which seemed to be planted by Yu Qi. In the bamboo forest, Yu Qi looked at Yi Xian, release your sword intent. Yi Xian nodded and then released his sword intent. In an instant, the entire forest was filled with his sword intent. After a moment of silence, Yu Qi said softly, do you know what stage you are at now? Yi Xian shook his head. Yu Qi said softly, the first stage is to comprehend sword intent, the second stage is to materialize sword intent, and the third stage is to transform sword intent into heaven and earth. The so-called transforming sword intent into heaven and earth means that your sword intent is no longer limited to your body, but can already fuse with heaven and earth. In other words, before, your body was actually a limit to your sword intent, but now, your sword intent has broken through this limit and has infinite possibilities. Yi Xian said solemnly, isn't that a sword immortal? Yu Qi shook his head, only half. Why do you say that? Yi Xian asked. Yu Qi said softly, to become a sword immortal, transforming sword intent into heaven and earth is only the first step, and the most important step is the second, which is the heart of the sword. Heart of the sword? Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Yu Qi explained, right now, you have a clear heart of the sword, which means that your heart of the sword is flawless, but to become a sword immortal, you need not only a clear heart of the sword, but also a bright heart of the sword. Bright heart of the sword. Yi Xian frowned slightly, a state of mind? Yu Qi nodded, a state of mind that is extremely difficult to understand. Moreover, everyone's state of mind is different, so no one's bright heart of the sword might be different. Of course, different paths lead to the same goal, and the final result is the same. Yi Xian asked, is this bright heart of the sword difficult? Yu Qi nodded, difficult. The senior brother who guards the sword tomb has been stuck here for more than 10 years. More than 10 years. Yi Xian's expression turned bitter. More than 10 years, this meant that to become a sword immortal, he would probably have to continue enduring. At this moment, Yu Qi suddenly laughed. You don't need to be discouraged. For you to be able to reach half-step sword immortal at this age, you are already a genius. You must know that before eldest senior brother's realm dropped, he was also slightly inferior to you. Yi Xian laughed. If I were a sword immortal now, I would be of great help to the sect. Yu Qi lightly patted him on the shoulder. I'm very happy that you think like this, but you don't have to worry too much about the sect's matters. Us older generation will solve these matters ourselves. What you need to do now is to cultivate properly, understand? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then said, what are our chances of winning? Yu Qi shook his head. I don't know. In any case, even if the chances of winning are 0, we still have to fight. We have no other choice. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. Yu Qi said, if there's nothing else, you can go to the depths of the sword tomb. The founding ancestor once cultivated there, and the existence of the founding ancestor's sword intent should be helpful to you. Yi Xian laughed bitterly. The martial uncle who guards the sword tomb won't let me go. Why? Yu Qi was slightly puzzled. Yi Xian laughed awkwardly. I went there once and devoured some swords. Yu Qi frowned. I only devoured some swords. You are one of us. Is a person not as important as a sword? Come with me. After that, Yu Qi brought Yi Xian to the sword tomb again. Seeing Yu Qi and Yi Xian, the elder's eyelids twitched. He hurriedly walked to Yu Qi and smiled. Little junior sister, why are you free to come here today? Yu Qi glanced at the elder. Senior brother Lin Xiu, why can't my disciple come to the sword tomb? Why, do you have a problem with me? The elder called Lin Xiu laughed bitterly. Little junior sister, what are you talking about? It's just that you know the rules here. You have to get the sect leader's approval before you can enter. Yu Qi frowned. Are you using second senior brother to pressure me? Lin Xiu's smile became even more bitter. Little junior sister, we are from the same sect. If you say that, Yu Qi was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, Uncle Master Lin Xiu, I devoured the swords without your approval previously. It was my fault. I apologize to Uncle Master here. Lin Xiu glanced at Yi Xian. I'm a little surprised that you can admit your mistake. As he spoke, he paused slightly. Although you improved because of that time, these things belong to the sect after all. You devoured them without informing us. This kind of behavior is not acceptable. Yi Xian hurriedly said, Yes, I know my mistake. I will definitely not do such a thing in the future. Just as Lin Xiu was about to say something, a voice suddenly rang in his head. Let him in. In the future, he can enter whenever he wants to. Train him with all your might. It was Chen Beihan's voice. Hearing that, Lin Xiu's expression changed. Train him with all my might. He knew very well what this sentence meant. Lin Xiu looked deeply at Yi Xian, then said, Go in. Yi Xian bowed slightly. Thank you. As he spoke, he turned to Yu Qi. Master, I'll go in first. Yu Qi nodded. Go deeper. Yi Xian nodded, then walked into the sword tomb. Yu Qi glanced at Lin Xiu. He has already reached the true defense realm. Do you understand? There was a tinge of pride in his voice. True defense realm. Lin Xiu was stunned. Yu Qi turned and left. True defense realm. Lin Xiu was stunned for a long time where he stood, then he shook his head and smiled. Monster, such a young true defense realm. In the younger generation of the divine central continent, apart from a few families and Xianmen in the upper worlds, basically no one could compare to him. In the sword tomb, Yi Xian kept walking deeper. The size of the sword tomb was slightly beyond Yi Xian's imagination. After walking for around an hour, Yi Xian stopped. He had reached the end. And here, he felt a faintly discernible sword essence. At the same time, the Lingxiu sword in his body suddenly trembled, as if it had sensed something. Yi Xian said softly, This should be the place where the firmament sword master once cultivated. As he spoke, he sat down cross-legged. Gradually, Yi Xian entered a meditative state. At this moment, he could clearly feel the faintly discernible sword essence around him. This sword essence was slightly special, but he couldn't tell what was special about it. Enlightenment. What he needed to do now was to comprehend. Just as Yi Xian was comprehending in the sword tomb, two old men suddenly came to World Shield Mountain. The two old men wore dark golden robes, and there were 12 people behind them. These 12 people all wore golden robes. In the hall, Lord Lu suddenly opened his eyes and said softly, "Yi Xian, you should die. P.S. I want to write a poem." Chapter 321. Early in the morning. A red sun slowly rose on the horizon, awakening all things. On this day, all the Realm Protection Alliance's true defensive realm powerhouses were mobilized. Their target was the Pale Sword Sect. The Level Protection Alliance didn't launch a sneak attack, because it was useless at a time like this. After all, the Pale Sword Sect had always been on guard against them. Supremacy Lu didn't want to launch a sneak attack either. He wanted to destroy the Pale Sword Sect openly. As the Realm Protection Alliance's powerhouses moved out, the entire Central Plains was shocked. The great battle was upon them. The Pale Sword Sect. At this moment, the Pale Sword Sect was on full alert, everyone ready for battle. This was a battle of life and death. If they lost, the Pale Sword Sect would be destroyed. When the nest was overturned, how could there be an unbroken egg? As disciples of the Pale Sword Sect, the only choice they had was to fight to the death. The clouds above the Pale Mountains suddenly dispersed, and Supremacy Lu and the others soon appeared in the sky above the Pale Sword Sect. Two old men stood on both sides of Supremacy Lu. Both of them wore dark golden robes and held a walking stick in their hands. Behind them were 12 people, all dressed in golden robes. Their faces were hidden beneath their robes, making it impossible to see their formation. The auras of the two old men and the 12 were as vast as the ocean, unfathomable. Behind them, there were still 32 people. These 32 people were all true defensive Dharma realm experts. Supremacy Lu looked down from the clouds, his face expressionless. In truth, compared to the Pale Sword Sect, he hated Yi Xian even more. It could be said that he hated him to the bone. Moreover, Yi Xian's rate of growth made him a little apprehensive. He'd watched Yi Xian grow up, and this speed was even more terrifying than the Pale Sword Sect's most dazzling sword Xian back in the day. Especially now that Yi Xian was being nurtured by the Pale Sword Sect. Once such a monster received good resources, his progress would be absolutely skyrocketing. In this world, some people were so freakishly unreasonable. Meanwhile, the old man on Exalt Lu's left spoke abruptly. The Firmament Sword Sect should have been annihilated a long time ago. Lord Lu glanced at the old man and said with a smile, "Left Protector is right. It's just that our Realm Defense Alliance has always been planning for the Lord's great matter, so we have not touched the Ashen Sword Sect. But now, the Ashen Sword Sect is acting recklessly, daring to protect Yi Xian who has seized the Origin Heart. But this is good, this time, we can wipe them all out." The Left Protector nodded slightly. "However, we still can't be careless. This Blue Sword Sect isn't simple. Don't fail miserably in an easy task." Lord Lu smiled. "Of course." As soon as he finished speaking, he looked down. Meanwhile, a ray of light shot into the sky, and it didn't take long for a middle-aged man to appear before them. The person that had arrived was the sect leader of the Blue Sword Sect, Chen Beihan. Chen Beihan glanced at Lord Lu and the others and smiled. "Everyone's presence really brings light to my Blue Sword Sect." Lu Xun said indifferently, "Chen Beihan, I'll give you one last chance. Hand over Yi Xian, otherwise, your Blue Sword Sect will be annihilated today." Annihilated. Chen Beihan smiled. "I still remember that when the ancestor was still alive, your Realm Defense Alliance also said the same thing. And now, the corpse of the Lord who said that is still at the foot of Blue Mountain. Do you want to go take a look?" Lu Xun sneered, unfortunately, your blue sword sect doesn't have a second firmament sword master. Chen Beihan nodded, indeed, the later generations are disappointing. There isn't another person like the ancestor, but you still have some backbone. As he spoke, he looked at Lu Xun and smiled, let's not waste any more words. Between the two of us, let's decide the winner and loser today. Lu Xun said indifferently, as you wish. Chen Beihan laughed out loud and dashed towards Lord Lu directly. Lu Xun was expressionless. His body trembled and he turned into a streak of light that shot out. Very quickly, a deafening explosion resounded in the sky. In the air, the left protector glanced at Lu Xun and then looked down. Is there anyone else from Blue Sword Sect? Below, a sword light suddenly shot into the sky. Very quickly, a middle-aged man appeared in front of the left protector. The middle-aged man wore a black robe and held a giant brush in his hand. This person was Imperial Brush Mountain's Lian Bixian, the third senior brother. Lian Bixian glanced at the left protector, please enlighten me. The left protector sneered, wrong. It should be death. As soon as he finished speaking, his right foot stomped on the ground. The space around Lian Bixian shook violently and in the next moment, he retreated hundreds of feet. Seeing this scene, the expressions of everyone below instantly turned serious. In the air, Lian Bixian glanced at the left protector, amazing. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly pointed his brush forward. In an instant, a drop of ink appeared, and in the next moment, a jet-black sword energy suddenly tore through the sky and arrived before the old man. The old man casually slapped out with his palm. Bang! The old man retreated by over 30 feet. When he stopped, the old man glanced at his palm. There was a drop of ink in his palm. In fact, his palm had been pierced. The old man raised his head and looked at Lian Bixian, who was not far away, and said indifferently, interesting, continue. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished. In the distance, Lian Bixian struck again. Below, the members of Blue Sword Sect were slightly worried. Because they noticed that Lian Bixian was obviously at a disadvantage. At this moment, another old man from the Realm Guard Alliance who wore a dark golden robe stood out and looked down coldly. Next. This person was the Realm Guard Alliance's Right Reverend. At this moment, Zhang Tai appeared in front of the Right Reverend. He glanced at the Right Reverend, and without a word, he directly drew the huge sword on his back and slashed at the Right Reverend. The Right Reverend laughed coldly as he raised his hand and slashed out. Bang! The entire sky trembled violently as Zhang Tai retreated repeatedly. But in the next moment, Zhang Tai charged forward once more. Below, Yu Qi frowned. This was because the strength of these two old men that had just appeared was a little beyond her expectations. Regardless of whether it was Lian Bixian or Zhang Tai, both of them were slightly inferior to these two old men. As time went on, it would be extremely disadvantageous to them. Meanwhile, Mo Xiu suddenly spoke indifferently, attack. As soon as his voice fell, the 32 true Imperial Dharma realm powerhouses behind him charged towards the Blue Sword Sect below. Group battle. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from within Blue Sword Sect. Activate the formation. As this voice fell, the entire Blue Sword Sect was suddenly filled with countless spirit swords that soared up into the sky. There were at least 100,000 of them. The expressions of Mo Xiu and the others changed drastically when they witnessed this scene, and they retreated in succession. In next to no time, numerous explosions resounded incessantly in the sky. In the Grand Hall of Array Dao Peak, Marshal Ant Gu sat before a sand table, and the terrain of the entire Blue Sword Sect was displayed on the sand table. Moreover, there were tens of thousands of violet source crystals in her room. After a short while, she suddenly formed a seal with her hands and shouted, "Change the formation." As soon as she spoke, the countless swords in the sky above Blue Sword Sect suddenly transformed. In next to no time, the swords suddenly condensed into 10 huge swords that were 300 m long. Moreover, every single one of these huge swords was extremely powerful, and the true Imperial Dharma realm experts didn't dare to go head-on against them. Meanwhile, Yuqi suddenly said, "Attack." As soon as Yuqi's voice resounded, over 10 rays of sword light shot into the sky from below Blue Sword Sect. Countless experts had gathered outside Blue Sword Sect as well. However, these experts weren't from the Realm Defense Alliance, and they were from various forces. It was impossible for the top forces of Blue Firmament World to not pay attention to the battle to the death between Blue Sword Sect and the Realm Defense Alliance. Because this time, it was very likely to change the power structure of Blue Firmament World. In the sky above Blue Sword Sect, the 30-plus experts from the Realm Defense Alliance were all entangled by the flying swords. With the addition of Yuqi and the others, at this moment, Blue Sword Sect wasn't at a disadvantage. Of course, this was because of the sword formation. And at this moment, the head of a true Imperial Dharma realm expert from the Realm Defense Alliance suddenly flew out. Noticing this scene, Mo Xiu's expression suddenly changed. It appeared again. That mysterious killer had appeared again. Mo Xiu hurriedly said angrily, "Be careful, there's an assassin in the dark." Before he finished speaking, the head of another true Imperial Dharma realm expert from the Realm Defense Alliance flew out. When this expert's head flew out, his eyes were still wide open. Clearly, he had died with a grievance. Mo Xiu hurriedly said, "Return to defend, gather together." Very quickly, the 27 true Imperial Dharma realm experts hurriedly gathered together. They weren't afraid of a head-on confrontation, but this kind of sneaky move, it was impossible to defend against. Yuqi glanced at his surroundings. Just who was helping him in secret? Without thinking much, she looked at Mo Xiu and the others. "Now, attack." The moment her voice landed, she and the experts from Blue Sword Sect behind her directly charged towards Mo Xiu and the others. But at this moment, the 12 experts in golden robes who hadn't attacked before suddenly disappeared on the spot. Boom! Below, the Hall of Array Dao Peak suddenly collapsed. Not only did the entire ground collapse, even half of Array Dao Peak collapsed. Following the collapse of Array Dao Peak, the spiritual swords in the sky above Blue Sword Sect disappeared without a trace. And when these 12 people joined the battle, the situation instantly reversed. Blue Sword Sect was directly suppressed. Because the battle strength of these 12 people was actually much stronger than the true Imperial Dharma realm experts. And following the addition of these 12 people, the experts from Blue Sword Sect gradually began to fall. At the same time, among these 12 people, 3 of them directly surrounded Yuqi. Suppressed. If it was one-on-one, Yuqi wasn't afraid, but now, it was 3 against 1, Yuqi was clearly helpless. Routed. Along with the addition of these 12 people, Blue Sword Sect started to be routed. Right at this moment, a ray of sword light shot into the sky from below. After it flew into the sky, it trembled violently and transformed into a huge sword net. A sword formation. It was Martial Ant Gu. Even though Array Dao Peak had been destroyed, she wasn't dead. In midair, the huge net of swords appeared out of thin air above the 12 gold figures, and then golden sword energy instantly slashed towards them. Bang! 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 Rumbling resounded incessantly in the sky. However, a short moment later, the sword energy and net in the sky vanished, whereas, those 12 people were completely unharmed. The faces of the experts from Blue Sword Sect instantly turned pale when they witnessed this scene. Meanwhile, a figure suddenly flew out from afar. It was Yuqi. Yuqi flew over 1 kilometer away, and when she stopped, a wisp of blood instantly seeped out from the corners of her mouth. However, 3 experts in golden robes had appeared in front of her again. Yuqi's eyes narrowed slightly, and she was about to attack again when Yi Xian appeared in front of her. Yuqi was instantly infuriated when she saw Yi Xian. "Let's go." Chapter 322. Let's go. Yi Xian's heart suddenly felt warm when he saw the furious Yu Qi. It could be said that coming to Pale Sword Sect and getting to know Yu Qi was the most worthwhile thing he'd done. Yi Xian didn't think too much about it, and he suddenly pressed his fingers together and pointed forward. Two swords suddenly slashed out from the sword chest on his back. In the distance, 3 experts attacked in unison. Bang! In practically an instant, both of Yi Xian's swords were slashed flying. Yi Xian's face instantly sank when he saw this. These people in golden robes were absolutely not experts at the True Defiance realm. Or perhaps, they weren't ordinary experts at the True Defiance realm. Yi Xian was about to attack again when Yu Qi suddenly pulled him behind her. In the next moment, she pressed her palms together, and a ray of sword light shot out from her palms. In the next moment, Yu Qi leaned forward, and then she pressed her palms together and slashed them forward. Hiss! An illusory and enormous sword slashed out from her palms. In the distance, the 3 of them stopped, and then they slapped their right palms forward at the same time. 3 golden palm prints tore through the sky and smashed directly onto the enormous sword. Bang! The enormous sword shattered with a bang, and the entire sky trembled. In the next moment, the 3 of them charged directly at Yu Qi. They were extremely swift, and their auras were like monstrous waves that were extremely terrifying. Yu Qi's pupils constricted when she saw this scene. She was just about to attack when Yi Xian suddenly descended to the ground of Pale Sword Sect. Yu Qi heaved a sigh of relief when she saw Yi Xian leave, and she was about to attack. But right at this moment, a powerful aura suddenly appeared from below. At this moment, countless people in the sky were stunned. Yu Qi looked down. Yi Xian was standing on the ground, and countless strands of the energy of the earth were converging towards him like a tide. The 3 experts opposite Yu Qi stopped as well, and they looked at Yi Xian with a trace of vigilance in their eyes. In next to no time, a golden sword suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Haoran Gaia, carrying the power of the earth. Yi Xian held the Haoran Gaia in his hand. At the same time, his sword will surged towards the Haoran Gaia. At this moment, the sword in Yi Xian's hand gave off an aura that far surpassed that of a true Imperial Magic Realm expert. Yi Xian grinned malevolently and raised his head to face the 3 golden-robed experts. Come, take my sword. As soon as he finished speaking, he stomped his right foot. The earth shook violently. Boom! A sword-emitting golden sword light soared into the sky, tearing apart the horizon. Everywhere this sword passed, space trembled violently as if it was about to be torn apart, and it was extremely shocking. Yu Qi's beautiful eyes were filled with disbelief when she saw this strike because the might of this strike had greatly exceeded her expectations. On the other hand, the 3 people opposite Yu Qi also had solemn expressions. None of them were careless, and the 3 of them suddenly formed a hand seal. In the next moment, 3 enormous palms that could prop up the heavens suddenly descended from the sky. If these 3 giant palms were to fall, the entire azure sword peak would probably be razed to the ground in an instant. At this moment, Yi Xian's sword arrived. Hiss! The sound of something tearing resounded abruptly in the sky, and then one of the enormous palms was directly shattered by Yi Xian's sword. However, another enormous palm smashed forcefully onto Yi Xian's sword. Bang! Yi Xian's halcyon armor trembled violently, and then the entire sword became illusory. However, the enormous palm was instantly shattered, and it transformed into a golden wave of air that shook through the sky. Meanwhile, another enormous golden palm smashed onto Yi Xian's halcyon armor. Bang! The ground trembled once more, and then it fell swiftly to the ground in front of Yi Xian. At the same time, the enormous palm in the sky became slightly illusory, but it didn't shatter. The enormous palm descended straight towards Yi Xian. Below, Yi Xian's expression was extremely solemn as he sensed the earth before him. He'd still underestimated the strength of these 12 people. If he fought them head-on, then unless he utilized the World Pagoda, otherwise, he wouldn't have any chance of winning. On the other hand, he didn't have any chance to launch a sneak attack. Because Mo Xiao and the others had banded together, so it was difficult for him to kill them without anyone noticing. As for these 12 people in gold robes, their strengths were above Mo Xiao and the others, so it was even more difficult to assassinate them. Right when Yi Xian was pondering, the enormous palm was already over 100 m above him. Meanwhile, Yu Qi suddenly pressed his fingers together and pointed towards the sky. A ray of sword light slashed up diagonally, and the enormous palm was instantly shattered. After he slashed the enormous palm into pieces, Yu Qi lowered his head to look at Yi Xian. Let's go. His tone was indisputable. Leave? Yi Xian shook his head. How could he leave at a time like this? Yi Xian grinned. Master, how about this? You fight 2, I'll fight 1. Yu Qi was just about to speak when Yi Xian had already charged towards one of the experts. A head-on battle. A true defense law realm expert wasn't a challenge to him now, and he wanted to fight an expert. Live combat was the best at improving a person. Especially battles of life and death. Because battles of life and death were usually able to stimulate a person's potential. When one faced a moment of life and death, anything was possible. Yi Xian held a heaven-rank sword in his hand as he charged directly towards that expert. That expert had a calm expression as he pressed the fingers of his right hand together and pointed forward. Bang! The space where Yi Xian resided instantly warped. Meanwhile, Yi Xian directly utilized the spatial Dao law, and under the influence of the spatial Dao law, the warped space instantly returned to normal. That expert's brows knit together slightly when he saw this scene. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's sword was already a few inches away from the space between his brows. This sword strike was extremely close to the space between the expert's brows, yet it was unable to pierce through. This little bit of distance seemed so close yet so far away. Meanwhile, that expert suddenly vanished. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly withdrew his sword and slashed diagonally. A fist smashed onto the blade of Yi Xian's sword. Bang! Yi Xian instantly retreated explosively by 300 m. After he stopped, he suddenly leaped up, and then 2 flying swords suddenly slashed out from within his sword chest. The swords were extremely swift, and they arrived before that expert in the blink of an eye. But just like before, the swords seemed to have been obstructed by something when they arrived before that expert, and they were unable to advance at all. That expert glanced at Yi Xian and said, "Monstrous indeed. Unfortunately, he's too young." As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward and arrived directly in front of Yi Xian. Then, a fist smashed onto Yi Xian's stomach. Bang! Yi Xian's figure arched as he was blasted flying, and he flew for over 600 m. Moreover, blood sprayed incessantly from his mouth. The gap. Yi Xian hadn't expected that there would be such a huge gap between him and his opponent even though he had already attained the magical suppression realm. There was a gap. But it didn't mean that he couldn't fight. Yi Xian roared furiously. The next moment, the entire ground trembled violently, and then, boundless energy of the earth converged towards him. Moreover, he had condensed a Halran Gaia in his hand. The expert narrowed his eyes at the sight of this. Yi Xian had used this technique just now, and it was extremely powerful. On the other side, Yi Xian held the Halran Gaia in his hand as he leaped to the expert's head, and then he slashed down. One strike to determine life and death. This strike contained 2 types of sword will, and 1 strike to determine life and death. This strike could be said to be his strongest strike besides the World Prison Pagoda. The sword stopped when it was 10 inches away from the expert's head. But in the next moment, the space around the expert suddenly trembled, and then something seemed to shatter. In the blink of an eye, the expert was instantly pushed back 300 m. After stopping, the expert touched his forehead. Fresh blood was slowly flowing down his forehead. After a moment of silence, he looked at Yi Xian with a gloomy expression. "No wonder the High Lord said that you must die. You are only at the magical suppression realm, but you can already hurt me. If we let you continue to grow, the Realm Protection Alliance will be in big trouble in the future. In the future? Yi Xian grinned. The Realm Protection Alliance will be in big trouble now. As soon as he finished speaking, he rushed out again. At this moment, the experts suddenly disappeared, and in front of Yi Xian, the space suddenly fluctuated violently like waves. Sensing this, Yi Xian's expression changed, and he slashed down with his sword with both hands. The moment the sword fell, the expert just happened to appear in front of Yi Xian, and at the same time, he punched out. This punch was like a volcanic eruption, and a domineering force poured out from his fist. Boom! The entire sky shook violently, and then, two figures rapidly retreated. That powerhouse quickly stopped. However, Yi Xian was still retreating violently. This time, he had retreated more than 1,000 feet. As soon as he stopped, blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth again. Yi Xian, on the other hand, grinned crazily. Reality proved that he could fight. If he was afraid from the beginning, then he might not know that the gap between him and his opponent was not as big as he thought. It was okay if he could not win, but he must dare to fight. Of course, many times, if he could not win, then he should not fight. But at this time, there was no other way, because the opponent was coming to kill him. If he fought, then he might have a chance to live, but if he did not fight, then he would not have a chance at all. Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and then he stomped his right foot on the ground and charged at the expert again. At this moment, the expert's expression had turned ferocious. Since you're courting death, then I'll fulfill your wish. As soon as he spoke, he suddenly spun his hands, and in an instant, two powerful auras swept out from between his hands. At the same time, he suddenly vanished. Boom! In the sky, a figure flew out without any warning. It was Yi Xian. However, in the next moment, Yi Xian charged at the expert again. But in no time, he charged out again. In the beginning, Yi Xian was completely suppressed. However, as the battle went on, the expert discovered to his shock that Yi Xian seemed to be growing stronger and stronger. After a quarter of an hour, Yi Xian flew out again. Just as he was about to charge out again, a familiar voice suddenly rang in his ears. Let me help you. Yi Xian nodded. Okay. As soon as he said that, a sword suddenly stabbed into his back. Yi Xian's body stiffened. P.S. I checked last night and found that since the new year, many readers have rewarded and voted. This directly brought me back to 9th place on the monthly votes list. I've seen every single one of the readers' rewards and votes, so I can't write them all here. Sorry. I'm really grateful for everyone's support. Life can be difficult at times, but you must face it with determination. Chapter 323. It was Gu Shi's voice. He was very familiar with the person who had stabbed his junior with a sword. Because this person was none other than Nangong. Nangong. Noticing this, Yu Qi's expression changed drastically. Just as he was about to turn back, he was blocked by the three powerhouses. Below them, countless Azure Sword sect disciples were stunned. How could Nangong attack Yi Xian? This was what Yi Xian wanted to know. Behind Yi Xian, Nangong's expression was ferocious. You seem to be very confused. Yi Xian nodded. Nangong smiled. Do you know? It wasn't easy to shatter Shang Yu's dantian and greatly reduce his strength. Who would have thought that another person like you would appear? With you around, I will never be able to stand out in the Azure Sword sect. Since that's the case, what's the point of me staying here? Speaking of this, his expression became even more ferocious. Don't think that I don't know how biased the sect leader is. You can enter the sword tomb whenever you want, and you even obtained several heaven-grade swords from it, right? Right? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly thrust his sword forward, and the sword directly entered Yi Xian's body. However, that sword was slowly disappearing. Sensing this, Nangong's expression changed drastically. He was about to retreat when Yi Xian suddenly turned around. A sword was pressed against his forehead. Nangong's body stiffened, his eyes filled with disbelief. "You, how can you be fine, you?" Yi Xian smiled. "Do you want to know?" Nangong was about to speak when Yi Xian grinned. "I'm not going to tell you." As soon as he finished speaking, he held his sword and stabbed it forward. Chi! The sword pierced through Nangong's forehead, causing blood to flow out. Nangong stared at Yi Xian, his eyes still filled with disbelief. He could not understand how Yi Xian was not only fine after his sword pierced Yi Xian's body, but also swallowed his sword. He couldn't figure it out even when he died. Yi Xian did not care about Nangong. Instead, he turned to face the golden-robed expert. He had always been at a disadvantage in the battle just now. The strength of the other party had completely exceeded his expectations. Although it was very strong, he was excited. Because after so long, he had never truly fought with anyone in a true sense. Although he had been suppressed in the battle just now, he had fought to his heart's content. Battle. Yi Xian stomped on the ground with his right foot and dashed out again. Seeing this scene, the eyelids of the strong man not far away twitched. He had already changed from looking down on Yi Xian in the beginning to taking him seriously. Because Yi Xian's battle prowess was really strong. Most importantly, Yi Xian was a little unafraid of death. He was playing with his life. Once he put his life on the line, there would definitely be a boost to his battle prowess. Not to mention Yi Xian, if any ordinary person put their life on the line, they would be feared. In front of Yi Xian, the expert was completely enraged. Experts who could reach this level were definitely not ordinary people. Once they faced Yi Xian directly, Yi Xian's chances of winning would be reduced. Soon, the two of them fought again. However, Yi Xian was still suppressed. In addition, because of the addition of these 12 people, the Azure Sword sect was completely suppressed. In the air, the battle between Chen Beihan and revered Lord Lu was still undecided. Therefore, if the battle continued, the Azure Sword sect would definitely not be able to win. Not only that, Zhang Tai and the others were obviously inferior to the left and right guardians of the Realm Defense Alliance. At this moment, the sound of a sword suddenly resounded from the distant sky. Then, in the air, an expert wearing a golden robe appeared. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. The golden-robed expert's head flew off in an instant. Seeing this scene, the nearby Mo Xiao and the others' expressions changed greatly. Soon, a middle-aged man appeared in the sky above the Azure Sword sect. This person was Jian Xian. Yu Qi and the others heaved sighs of relief when they saw Jian Xian. There was no doubt that Jian Xian was the most capable person in the Azure Sword sect. On the other side, those golden-robed experts looked at Jian Xian. Their eyes were filled with seriousness when they looked at Jian Xian. Jian Xian held his sword and looked coldly at those golden-robed experts. He didn't waste his breath, and in the next moment, he slashed forward swiftly with his sword. His sword was extremely fast, so fast that it was impossible to see the trajectory of the sword light. In the distance, the expression of one of the golden-robed experts changed greatly. He overlapped his hands and suddenly pressed forward. At this moment, the space in front of him actually shook like a wave. At this moment, Jian Xian's sword arrived. Hiss! Under everyone's gazes, the sword directly cut open the space in front of them. Bang! The entire space shook violently, and then a powerful force blasted the golden-robed expert away. This flight covered a distance of several thousand feet. However, Jian Xian didn't stop. He pointed with his fingers, and a strand of sword light suddenly tore through the sky. A few hundred meters away, a law defense realm expert of the Guardian Alliance was instantly pierced between his brows. The expert's eyes were wide open, and he died with everlasting regret. Because he didn't realize how the sword had pierced through his brows until he died. Jian Xian was about to attack when a furious shout suddenly sounded out from nearby. How dare you! As the voice fell, an old man suddenly appeared in front of Jian Xian. The old man was the left guardian of the Guardian Alliance, and on the other side, Lian Bixian who was fighting him had appeared as well. But at this moment, Lian Bixian's face was pale, and there was blood at the corner of his mouth. Obviously, he was injured. Lian Bixian spoke softly when he saw Jian Xian, eldest senior brother. Jian Xian nodded slightly. Go help Zhang Tai. Lian Bixian nodded, and then he transformed into a ray of sword light that charged towards the right guardian of the Guardian Alliance. Jian Xian turned to look at the left guardian and sneered, I thought that the Lord of the Guardian Alliance would come personally, but I didn't expect that he would only send 2 pieces of trash like you. The left guardian narrowed his eyes, Lord? Jian Xian, do you think that someone like you is worthy of the Lord to come personally? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly flew up, and in the next moment, he formed seals with his hands, and in an instant, numerous black streams of air appeared in the surroundings. The left guardian suddenly roared furiously, condense. As soon as he finished speaking, the black streams of air in the surroundings were about to condense, but right at this moment, Jian Xian suddenly slashed forward with his sword, break. As soon as the sword descended, a ray of sword light that was 300 m long suddenly slashed down from the sky like a waterfall. Hiss! In an instant, the black streams of air in the sky vanished without a trace. The left guardian's expression changed greatly, and he hurriedly dodged backwards. With this dodge, he dodged a few hundred meters and completely pulled away from Jian Xian. Jian Xian glanced coldly at him. Come, I'll give you another chance to use it. Don't say that my Azure Sword sect is bullying you. The left guardian's expression was extremely unsightly. Jian Xian, you'll pay the price for your arrogance. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly tapped his chest. In an instant, a powerful aura suddenly swept out from his body, and along with the appearance of this aura, the entire space in the sky suddenly surged like a wave of water. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Come. In the distance, Jian Xian was expressionless as he held the sword in his right hand behind his shoulder. After a moment of silence, the left guardian suddenly charged into the sky, and in the next moment, he slapped his palm down towards Jian Xian. His palm struck out. A palm print suddenly pierced through the layers of space and approached Jian Xian. This palm print directly pierced through space, so it was so fast that besides Jian Xian, no one could see it clearly. At this moment, Jian Xian attacked. A sword stabbed forward. It was a very simple sword strike. Hiss. As soon as his sword stabbed forward, the space at the tip of Yi Xian's sword suddenly split open, and a pitch-black rift appeared there. In next to no time, a world-shaking explosion resounded. Rumble. The entire sky trembled violently, and the left protector was forced to retreat continuously. This time, he retreated several hundred meters. As soon as he stopped moving, Jian Xian suddenly appeared in front of him, and then a sword stabbed straight towards the center of his forehead. It was like a bolt of lightning, and it was extremely swift. The left guardian's pupils constricted while he was shocked in his heart. At this moment, he was utterly unable to dodge, and he could only take this attack head-on. In next to no time, he suddenly roared furiously, and then he smashed his fist forward. Bang! As the punch landed, an explosion resounded in the sky like a clap of thunder. Jian Xian's sword shattered into pieces, whereas, the left guardian was 300 m away. At the same time, his entire right arm had been chopped off. Blood flowed incessantly from his left shoulder. The left guardian stared fixedly at Jian Xian while he felt extremely fearful in his heart. He hadn't expected that Jian Xian would actually be so formidable, and it was to the point that Jian Xian could be said to have exceeded the scope of the Azure world. Jian Xian didn't attack the left guardian again, and he turned around and slashed down instead. The head of a true defense law realm expert from the Guardian Alliance that was over 100 m away instantly flew into the air. At the same time, the head of another true defense law realm expert that was over 100 m away flew into the air as well. Instant death. It was an instant death. The expressions of the experts from the Guardian Alliance changed drastically when they witnessed this scene, and they retreated successively and didn't dare attack again. On the other hand, the left Guardian had a solemn expression on his face as well. If he didn't deal with Jian Xian, then not only would the Azure Sword sect be unable to be annihilated today, all of them would probably perish here. When he thought up to here, he hesitated for a moment before he withdrew a transmission talisman and crushed it. Call for reinforcements? Jian Xian spoke indifferently from not too far away. Let me see how many more experts your Guardian Alliance has. But I'll deal with all of you first before that. As soon as he finished speaking, he was just about to attack again. Right at this moment, the left Guardian suddenly sneered, Jian Xian, someone can deal with you. As soon as he finished speaking, two formidable auras suddenly appeared in the sky above the Azure Sword sect. Jian Xian frowned when he sensed this scene, and then he raised his head. The space in the sky suddenly split open, and then a middle-aged man and an old man walked out from within. They were Lin Songyun and the Left Guardian Alliance from the Spirit Void Star Palace. The Left Guardian flew over to them and pointed at Jian Xian, both of you, this person's strength is extraordinary, so I'll have to trouble the both of you. Lin Songyun glanced at Jian Xian with a trace of surprise in his eyes. I never expected that such an expert would actually exist here. The Left Guardian's expression changed. Meanwhile, Lin Songyun added, we can deal with him for you, but that's just a matter of searching for someone. The Left Guardian hurriedly said, leave it to the Guardian Alliance. Lin Songyun nodded slightly, and then he glanced at the surroundings. In the next moment, he seemed to have been petrified. End of this chapter. Chapter 324. Lin Songyun's eyes opened wide while he was stunned on the spot, and he was staring fixedly at a single person. It was Yi Xian. Yi Xian. Beside Lin Songyun, Qin Zhen was also stunned when he saw Yi Xian. In the next moment, Lin Songyun appeared in front of Yi Xian. Jian Xian frowned slightly when he saw this, and he was about to attack. However, Lin Songyun suddenly waved his right hand and blasted the gold-robed expert who was about to attack Yi Xian flying. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned when they witnessed this scene. What the hell is going on? On the other hand, the left protector's brows were knit together tightly. As if he'd thought of something, he suddenly withdrew a drawing, and it was the one Lin Songyun had given him. The person in the drawing was Yi Xian. The left protector's face instantly turned gloomy, and his gaze flickered as he glanced at Yi Xian. No one knew what he was thinking. Lin Songyun gazed at Yi Xian with an extremely amiable expression. May I ask if you know a woman in a plain dress? A plain dress? Yi Xian was stunned, and then he became slightly vigilant. At this moment, he was extremely shocked. Who is this person? Why does he know a woman in a plain dress? Lin Songyun grinned when he noticed Yi Xian's vigilance. Don't worry, we have no ill intent. She asked us to come look for you. Look for me? Yi Xian was stunned, and then he hurriedly said, where is she now? Lin Songyun and Qin Zhen exchanged glances, and there was slight excitement in their eyes. Because Yi Xian's words represented that he knew the woman in a plain dress. Lin Songyun gazed at Yi Xian and smiled. She's at Spirit Void Star Palace right now. Can you go look for her with us right now? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he shook his head. What? Lin Songyun hurriedly asked, is there a problem? Yi Xian nodded. I can't leave yet. As he spoke, he faced Imo Xiao and the others from the Realm Protection Alliance. The Realm Protection Alliance will not let me leave. Lin Songyun glanced at the left protector and the others, and then he said indifferently, don't worry, they won't dare to touch you with the two of us here. His voice was very loud, and everyone in the surroundings heard him clearly. Obviously, this was purposely said for the Realm Defense Alliance to hear. Not far away, the left protector looked at Lin Songyun. Sir, this Yi Xian is someone that my Realm Protection Alliance must kill. Someone I must kill? Lin Songyun's eyes narrowed. You said that he is someone that your Realm Defense Alliance must kill. The left protector nodded. Yes. Lin Songyun coldly laughed. Ignorant. Let me give you a word of advice, your Realm Defense Alliance better not touch this person, otherwise. Otherwise what? Just then, a voice rang through the air. Then, Supreme Lord Lu appeared not too far away from Lin Songyun. At the same time, Chen Beihan appeared over 100 feet away from Yi Xian. Obviously, the two of them were evenly matched in strength. It was impossible to determine life and death in a short period of time. Supreme Lord Lu stared fixedly at Lin Songyun. My Realm Protection Alliance must kill this person. No one can protect him. How dare you? Lin Songyun frowned. Your tiny Realm Protection Alliance really doesn't know the immensity of the heavens and earth. Let me tell you, if you dare touch this person in the slightest, then my Void Spirit Star Palace will annihilate your Realm Protection Alliance. Void Spirit Star Palace? Supreme Lord Lu frowned. He turned to look at the left protector. The left protector shook her head. It isn't a force from our star region. I don't know what force it is. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. Supreme Lord Lu looked at Lin Songyun. Sir, my Realm Protection Alliance has no enmity with your Void Spirit Star Palace, nor do we wish to become enemies with you. But my Realm Protection Alliance must kill this Yi Xian. I hope that you will not stop us. Lin Songyun looked straight at Supreme Lord Lu. I said that no one can touch this person. Supreme Lord Lu's expression instantly turned gloomy when he heard this. At the side, Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, That's Senior, she asked you to come find me? Lin Songyun smiled. Yes, she is at Void Spirit Star Palace at this moment. It will only take a month from here. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, Then can you notify her now? Lin Songyun shook his head. To cross star regions, the two of us don't have the ability to do that. So, the two of us hope that you will return to Void Spirit Star Palace with us. She is waiting for you right now. Obviously, he hoped that Yi Xian would return to Void Spirit Star Palace with him right now. After all, he wanted to report back as soon as possible. Otherwise, once that mysterious woman flared up, then Void Spirit Star Palace would probably suffer a calamity. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Senior, firstly, I really can't leave right now. Secondly, the Realm Defense Alliance won't let me leave as well. Even though he could leave with the two of them, the Pale Sword Sect was in danger, so how could he leave just like that? Lin Songyun thought for a moment, and then he said, Then when can you leave? Yi Xian pointed at Supreme Lord Lu and the others in the distance. We'll have to wait to ask them. Lin Songyun turned around to gaze at Supreme Lord Lu. Is your Realm Defense Alliance really going to act against him? Supreme Lord Lu spoke indifferently. He must die. Lin Songyun gazed at Supreme Lord Lu for a short moment, and then he nodded. It looks to me like you want to die. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly took a step forward, and a powerful aura suddenly enveloped Supreme Lord Lu. In the next moment, a powerful force rained down from above Supreme Lord Lu's head. Supreme Lord Lu's expression changed drastically. Obviously, he hadn't expected Lin Songyun to suddenly attack. Not to mention him, no one here had expected Lin Songyun to actually attack. The powerful force above Supreme Lord Lu's head was like a mountain that pressed down upon him. He didn't dare act carelessly, and he clenched his right hand into a fist and smashed it upwards. Bang! With Supreme Lord Lu at the center, the space in an area of over 1 kilometer shook violently, and then a world-shaking explosion resounded from above Supreme Lord Lu. Meanwhile, Lin Songyun suddenly vanished. A moment later, Supreme Lord Lu's pupils constricted, and then he smashed his fist forward. Bang! In front of everyone's eyes, Lord Lu retreated 1,000 feet. He just stopped when a wisp of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. Supreme Lord Lu wiped off the blood on the corner of his mouth, and then he looked up at Lin Songyun. Are you really going to become enemies with my Realm Defense Alliance for the sake of Yi Xian? Become enemies? Lin Songyun laughed coldly. To be honest, a third-rate power like your Realm Defense Alliance isn't qualified to become enemies with my Spirit Void Star Palace. The expressions of Supreme Lord Lu and the experts of the Realm Defense Alliance instantly became slightly ferocious. No one had ever humiliated the Realm Defense Alliance like this. Supreme Lord Lu laughed savagely. How arrogant of you. Aren't you afraid of cutting your tongue? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly pressed his palms together, and then he swiftly moved forward. Destroy. As soon as he finished speaking, the space in front of him suddenly split apart, and then a palm shot out explosively from within the spatial rift and shot straight at Lin Songyun. Lin Songyun's face remained emotionless. The ignorant are fearless. As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward and smashed his fist forward. A ray of light that was shaped like an umbrella swept out from within his fist. If this chapter isn't finished, please continue to the next page. Come. Bang. As soon as they collided, the entire sky trembled violently, and then they exploded apart. They transformed into a powerful wave of energy that surged incessantly towards the surroundings, and in an instant, the entire sky trembled. On the other hand, Supreme Lord Lu retreated repeatedly, and he'd left the territory of the Firmament Sword sect. How strong! Yi Xian's heart shook. Lin Songyun's strength is much stronger than I imagined. It might be on par with Jian Xian. However, he didn't dare be certain. Because he felt that no matter if it was Lin Songyun or Jian Xian, both of them were definitely concealing their strength and hadn't displayed their full strength. In the air, Lin Songyun glanced coldly at the nearby Supreme Lord Lu. My Void Spirit Star Palace will not allow anyone to harm this person. If your Realm Defense Alliance wants his life, then my Void Spirit Star Palace will destroy you. What a joke. The nearby Left Protector suddenly said fiercely, destroy my Realm Defense Alliance? I don't know what kind of power your Void Spirit Star Palace is, but aren't you afraid of biting your own tongue when you say you want to destroy us? Lin Songyun was about to say something when Qin Jin shook his head. There's no need to say anything more. People like them have never left this region of the stars, nor have they seen the vast space outside. No matter how much you tell them, they won't have the slightest idea. As he spoke, he looked at the nearby Left Protector. Then let's directly attack. Directly attack. Below, countless Blue Sword Sect's disciples were somewhat dumbstruck, including Yu Qi and the rest. Where on earth were these two from? Why were they so protective of Yi Xian? At this moment, Lin Songyun and Qin Jin were definitely protecting Yi Xian. They hadn't expected to find Yi Xian here. Since they had found him, this meant that Void Spirit Star Palace's crisis had been resolved. One had to know that the woman had already lost her patience. If there was still no news of Yi Xian, there was no guarantee that Void Spirit Star Palace wouldn't be split apart by her sword. Right now, they only wanted to bring Yi Xian back as soon as possible. In the distance, the Left Protector looked at Lin Songyun and Qin Jin for a long time. A moment later, he said in a low voice, You two, just who is this Yi Xian? Why are you protecting him? Lin Songyun said indifferently, someone you can't afford to offend. Can't afford to offend. In the distance, Yi Xian stilled. Can't afford to offend me? Very quickly, he began to understand. It was probably because of the plainly dressed woman. In reality, at this moment, he was also somewhat puzzled. The plainly dressed woman had asked him to go look for her, but he couldn't figure out why she'd asked him to go look for her. So mysterious. Yi Xian shook his head and stopped thinking about it. At any rate, the mysterious woman wouldn't harm him. The Left Protector glanced at Yi Xian, and then he said fiercely, I don't care who he is. He must die. As he spoke, he gazed at Exalt Lu. Both of them nodded slightly, and then Exalt Lu opened his palm. A strand of white light suddenly floated out. In next to no time, a figure gradually condensed within the white light. At the same time, a wave of pressure suddenly appeared here. Bang! Countless mountains had actually started to crack and collapse. At this moment, the expressions of everyone here instantly became solemn. Lin Songyun gazed at the figure, and then he suddenly gazed at Yi Xian. Let's go. Yi Xian was stunned. Meanwhile, Jian Xian suddenly said, listen to him. P.S. Some readers have told me that there are pirated versions in some places. Moreover, the author's name has been changed, and they're even collecting money. Actually, I have no choice. If I sue them, I might sue myself into poverty. Just support the original version. End of this chapter. Break. As soon as he finished speaking, the sword trembled violently, and then a ray of dazzling light suddenly erupted from it. Bang! A deafening explosion suddenly resounded through the sky, and then countless rays of light shot towards the surroundings. At the same time, the entire sky became illusory as if it was about to shatter. It was extremely shocking. In midair, Jian Xian looked up at the white-haired middle-aged man with an expressionless face, and there was a ray of light flickering on the tip of his finger. The white-haired man glanced at Jian Xian and spoke indifferently, since the firmament sword master, you can be considered to be a pretty good swordsman in the firmament world. Unfortunately, the swordsman Dao is merely a Xiao Dao in my eyes. Xiao Dao? Lin Songyun suddenly smiled, you think the swordsman Dao is a Xiao Dao? The white-haired man looked at Lin Songyun and replied with a question, you think it's very strong? Lin Songyun shook his head and smiled. In the past, he did not think that the swordsman Dao was very strong, because the swordsmen Dao that he had met were very, very few. It should be known that the swordsman Dao was harder to cultivate the higher one went, so there were very, very few truly strong swordsmen Dao in the world. However, that was until he met the woman in the plain dress. Swordsman not strong? That's because you haven't met a strong one. The true peerless swordsman Dao was so strong that it made people feel despair. The white-haired man suddenly said, actually, I'm also very curious, what exactly is it that makes you all want to protect? As he said this, he pointed at Yi Xian who was not far away, protect him. Lin Songyun smiled, is there any point in saying all this now? The white-haired man said indifferently, there is indeed no point. If that's the case, then all of you can be buried with him. As soon as he finished speaking, he flipped his right hand up again. The next moment, a giant illusory palm suddenly appeared in the sky above the firmament sword sect. This palm was hundreds of feet long, blocking out the sky and the sun. As this palm appeared, an aura that could destroy heaven and earth came crashing down from the sky. Under this aura, the countless firmament sword sect disciples below suddenly found it hard to breathe. A powerhouse that could destroy heaven and earth. Yi Xian's right hand clenched tightly. At this moment, he felt a sense of helplessness. A deep sense of helplessness. Because in front of such a powerhouse, there was nothing he could do. He knew that even if he took out the prison pagoda, it would be useless. It wasn't that the prison pagoda was useless, it was that he was currently too weak. Other than that, he didn't dare to use the prison pagoda anymore. If this thing was used again, it might create someone even more terrifying than this white-haired man. Instinct told him that the existence inside the pagoda was the real terror. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished, and he was so swift that practically no one was able to see him clearly. In the distance. Bang! Jian Xian was blasted flying again, and this time, his body actually split apart. If he were to receive another palm strike, then his body would shatter into pieces. The white-haired man didn't hold back at all, and he immediately vanished once more. Meanwhile, Chen Beihan suddenly vanished, and he was already in front of Jian Xian when he appeared once more. In the blink of an eye, he suddenly slashed his sword forward. Bang! The sword instantly shattered into pieces. At the same time, Chen Beihan's figure was blasted over 1 kilometer away. Jian Xian was stunned when he witnessed this scene. In the next moment, he suddenly gazed at the white-haired man, and then he stomped his right foot against the air. After that, a ray of light slashed forward. The ray of light was extremely swift, and it instantly arrived before the white-haired man. The white-haired man's face remained emotionless as he raised his hand and smashed his fist forward. Rumble. The ray of light instantly shattered into pieces. Meanwhile, a sword had arrived before the center of his forehead, and it was only a few inches away from his forehead. However, it wasn't able to move forward by even an inch. Because the white-haired man had clamped down on the sword with 2 fingers. The white-haired man exerted a little force with his fingers, and then a crack resounded as the sword shattered into pieces while Jian Xian was blasted flying once more. He was invincible. At this moment, countless disciples of the Pale Sword sect felt despair. Right at this moment, a furious shout resounded from below. Activate the formation. It was Martial Aunt Gu's voice. As soon as her voice resounded, the ground throughout the Pale Sword sect suddenly trembled, and it didn't take long for an ethereal platform to suddenly appear in the sky above the Pale Sword sect. Moreover, Lian Bixian, Yu Qi, Martial Aunt Gu, Zhan Tai, Chen Beihan, and Sung Xian had all appeared on the platform. In the next moment, all of them suddenly stabbed their swords into the platform, and then a ray of light suddenly shot into the sky. It tore through the clouds and shot into the starry sky. A sword formation. In midair, the white-haired man glanced at the platform and spoke softly. This is probably the Immortal Annihilation sword formation left behind by the Firmament Sword Master. It's really extraordinary. Come, let me see it. As soon as he finished speaking, his right hand pressed down slightly. In an instant, an invisible pressure crushed down from the center of his palm. Chapter 326. On the round stage, the 6 of them held their swords close to their eyebrows. Sword intent flowed out from their bodies, and on the ground of the round stage, countless sword lights gathered. Immortal Slaying Sword Array. This was the array that the Firmament Sword Master left for the Firmament Sword sect to protect themselves. It was also the strongest trump card of the Firmament Sword sect. Originally, they didn't want to use it, but this white-haired man's strength was too strong. If they didn't use it now, they might not have the chance to use it again. In the air, the white-haired man had his right hand behind his back. He was expressionless, and in his palm, a wave of energy was gathering. On the other side, Supreme Lu and the others had already retreated to the side. Actually, they didn't want to summon this white-haired man. Because this was what they prepared to deal with the mysterious woman. Unfortunately, Lin Songyun and Qin Wentian were protecting Yi Xian, so they had no choice but to use this trump card. It could be said that both sides had already used their trump cards. At this moment, although this white-haired man seemed to have crushed the Firmament Sword sect, Supreme Lu still felt uneasy. Because the mysterious woman still hadn't appeared. The feeling that woman gave him was too terrifying. But now, that woman still hadn't appeared. This was what he was most uneasy about. Not far away, Lin Songyun and Qin Zhen's expressions were ugly. Obviously, the 2 of them didn't expect this white-haired man's strength to be so terrifying. After a moment of silence, Lin Songyun said solemnly, "The Realm Defense Alliance is determined to kill him. We must inform the higher-ups, otherwise that kid will die in this world." Qin Zhen said solemnly, "You go back." Lin Songyun shook his head, "You go back, I will stay here to protect him." Qin Zhen wanted to say something, but Lin Songyun shook his head, "Don't waste time. Quickly go." Qin Zhen looked at Lin Songyun, "Be careful. I will return as soon as possible." Finishing, he turned around and disappeared into the horizon. 1 month. Lin Songyun looked at the horizon with a hint of worry in his eyes. From Spirit Void Star Palace to here, they used a month's time. And if Qin Zhen went back and brought more people here, that meant it would take at least 2 months. 2 months' time. Lin Songyun glanced at the white-haired man in the sky. This white-haired man was only a clone. If the main body appeared here, there was no way they could fight against him. Lin Songyun shook his head and sighed. No matter what, he could only try his best. Below, on the round platform, 6 illusory swords of light had condensed above the heads of the 6 people. On the round platform, the 6 people's sword intents had also condensed into one. The 6 sword intents merged together. After a moment of silence, Chen Beihan suddenly shouted angrily, "Attack!" As soon as they finished speaking, the 6 of them pointed their fingers toward the sky. So. The 6 illusory swords above the heads of the 6 people suddenly transformed into a sword light and shot into the sky, slashing straight at the white-haired man. Wherever the 6 sword lights passed, the space was directly torn apart. In the air, the white-haired man was expressionless. He suddenly loosened his right hand, and in the next moment, he slammed it down. Rumble. The entire sky shook violently, and countless people instantly felt dizzy. In midair, a formidable force directly pressed down upon the 6 sword lights, and in next to no time, numerous terrifying waves of air ceaselessly shook out towards the surroundings. Below them, countless buildings in the blue sword sect started to collapse inch by inch, and it wasn't just that, even the ground started to crack open at this moment. Just at this moment, the 6 sword lights in the sky suddenly collapsed and transformed into sword chi that shot out in all directions. Defeated. In the distance, Yi Xian slowly clenched his right hand. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in his mind, "Leave, immediately. Run as far as you can." It was Yu Qi's voice. Yi Xian raised his head and looked at the round platform nearby. At this moment, Yu Qi's face was pale, and blood flowed endlessly from the corner of his mouth. Leave? Yi Xian shook his head. How could he leave at a time like this? Moreover, he couldn't leave. Because the white-haired man definitely wouldn't let him go. The white-haired man wanted to destroy the Pale Sword sect, and he wanted to kill him as well. In the air, the white-haired man glanced at Chen Beihan and the others, the Immortal slaying sword formation. Not bad. If I'm not wrong, the sword intent left behind by your Pale Sword sect's founding ancestor is below the round platform. Unfortunately, you can't draw it out, right? On the round platform, Chen Beihan looked at the white-haired man. If you have the founding ancestor's sword, you can draw out his sword intent and this clone of yours will be destroyed instantly. The white-haired man smiled. Unfortunately, you don't have it. In the distance, Yi Xian was stunned, and then he hurriedly flew to the round platform. I have it, I have it. Yu Qi appeared in front of him and said angrily, I told you to leave, so leave. Chen Beihan nodded slightly. We'll do our best to hold him back later. At that time, find an opportunity to escape. If you're not strong enough in the future, don't show yourself. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly took out a sword. The exquisite sword. To be more precise, it was the Firmament Thunder Sword, the sword of the founding ancestor of the Pale Sword sect. Everyone on the round platform was stunned when they saw this sword. Obviously, they recognized this sword. Why are you, at the side? Zhang Tai looked at Yi Xian in disbelief. Why do you have the founding ancestor's sword? Chen Beihan and the others were also shocked. They didn't expect Yi Xian to have the Firmament Sword Master's sword. Yi Xian smiled awkwardly. It's a long story. Chen Beihan nodded slightly. Let's not talk about this first. Saying that, he looked at Yi Xian. You use this sword and draw out all the sword intent in this sword formation. Saying that, he looked at Yu Qi and the others. Begin. The 6 of them returned to their positions, and Yi Xian stood in the middle. Chen Beihan suddenly shouted angrily, Begin. Boom. An illusory huge sword instantly condensed above the heads of the 6 of them. At the same time, the sword intent of the 6 of them appeared on the round platform, and the exquisite sword in Yi Xian's hand started to tremble violently. Not only the sword in his hand, but the entire round platform also started to tremble crazily as if something was about to come out. In the air, the white-haired man frowned slightly. He clenched his right hand slowly and a wave of energy silently condensed in his palm. At this moment, Chen Beihan suddenly shouted angrily, "Gather!" As soon as he shouted, the 6 swords condensed above the heads of the 6 of them. At this moment, a powerful sword intent gathered towards Yi Xian like a flood. The sword intent didn't enter his body, but gathered into the exquisite sword in his hand. Buzz! The sound of a sword suddenly resounded through the sky. Yi Xian's entire body was trembling. At this moment, he felt that the sword in his hand contained boundless power. At this moment, he had a kind of confidence, a confidence that he could split the heavens with one sword. At the side, Chen Beihan suddenly looked at him and shouted angrily, "Attack!" Yi Xian stabbed towards the sky, and the sword in his hand transformed into a sword light that shot into the sky. At this moment, the exquisite sword had far surpassed the heaven grade under the enhancement of the sword intent of the firmament world sword master. This sword pierced through the sky. Seeing how terrifying this sword was, the expressions of Lord Lu and the others instantly turned solemn. In the air, the white-haired man squinted his eyes and suddenly disappeared. In the next moment, an afterimage descended from the sky, and when he arrived in front of the sword, he slapped down with his palm. The moment the palm and the sword came into contact, the heavens and earth shook violently. Rumble. Below, the round platform suddenly collapsed, and countless sword lights shot out in all directions. At the same time, the entire Ashenward Peak started to collapse, and the surroundings were in a mess. Everyone raised their heads to look at the white-haired man in the air. At this moment, the white-haired man stood silently in the air. He was expressionless as if nothing had happened. However, a trace of uneasiness arose in the hearts of Lord Lu and the others. In the air, the white-haired man looked down at Yi Xian. "Why do you have his sword?" On the round platform, Yi Xian grinned. "Take a guess." The white-haired man stared at Yi Xian. "Don't worry, you'll die for sure." As soon as he finished speaking, his body gradually became illusory. At the sight of this, everyone from the Pale Sword sect heaved a sigh of relief. As for the Realm Defense Alliance, their expressions sank. That sword strike had actually destroyed this clone. Just as the clone was about to completely dissipate, the white-haired man suddenly spoke. "Yi Xian. Just you wait." As soon as he finished speaking, he completely disappeared in the air. On the other side, Lord Lu and the others quietly retreated. Chen Beihan and the others didn't stop them, because they couldn't stop the other party now unless they wanted to fight to the death. After the Realm Defense Alliance and the others retreated, the surrounding experts also retreated. The Pale Sword sect had won. Very quickly, this news swept through the entire divine central continent like a plague. All the powers were shocked. Obviously, they hadn't expected that the Pale Sword sect would win. After all, the Realm Defense Alliance was still the #1 power in the firmament world. Moreover, they'd mobilized so many experts this time. However, the Pale Sword sect had won. It was extremely dramatic. On the other hand, the expressions of everyone within the Pale Sword sect were solemn. Because they knew that this victory was only temporary. Because the Realm Defense Alliance would definitely make a comeback. At that time, it might not be a clone, but the white-haired man's main body. A clone was already so terrifying, so if the main body descended, would the Pale Sword sect be able to resist it? Within Cloudsword Hall. All the important figures of the Pale Sword sect were within the hall, and Jian Xian was there as well. All of them were looking at Yi Xian. They were all waiting for Yi Xian's answer. Because Yi Xian possessed the Firmament Sword Master's sword, and they were extremely curious about this matter. Within the hall, Yi Xian fell silent for a long time before he said, "I just obtained the founding ancestor's sword by chance." He didn't continue when he spoke up to hear. Chen Beihan glanced at Yi Xian and said softly, "Since you don't want to say more, then we won't force you." However, the founding ancestor's sword in your hands might be the will of the heavens. From this moment onwards, you're the next sect master of my pale sword sect. Yi Xian suddenly shook his head. Sect master, I'm not interested in the position of sect master. Chen Beihan smiled. If you become the sect master, then you can obtain anything in the sect at any time. Yi Xian hurriedly said, then I'll consider it. Everyone was speechless. P.S. Happy Lantern Festival. Aren't you curious about what's in the box that Xiaoling obtained? Let me see if there's a god. Chapter 327. Everyone in the hall shook their heads and smiled when they heard Yi Xian's words. Soon, everyone left. Only Jian Xian and Chen Beihan were left in the hall. Chen Beihan looked at Jian Xian and smiled. Eldest senior brother, I didn't expect that you would break through to the great sword immortal level after leaving the sect for so many years. Jian Xian shook his head. Half a step and you will be stuck there forever. Chen Beihan nodded. The higher you go, the harder it is. Then, he seemed to have thought of something and asked, what about that young man? Jian Xian was silent for a moment and then said, his character is not suitable to be the sect leader. Chen Beihan shook his head. This time, I have the opposite opinion from senior brother. Jian Xian looked at Chen Beihan and the latter smiled. I have already investigated. This person is the Dean of Blue Waves Academy in Qingzhou and that academy is well managed by him. Although this person's character is a little extreme and irritable, that's only towards enemies. He's still very loyal to his own people. Then, he paused and said, as for his extreme character, as long as he is strong enough, these problems are not a problem. Jian Xian looked at Chen Beihan. His character is similar to mine. Aren't you afraid? Chen Beihan shook his head. Previously, I also thought that his character is similar to yours. But in the end, I found that in fact, they are very different. First, he is not inflexible. He knows how to adapt to changing circumstances. Sometimes, not only is he shameless, but he also plays dirty. In other words, he is very black-bellied. Second. Then, he looked at Jian Xian. We need someone who can control both the inside and the outside world. Hearing this, Jian Xian was silent. In any sect or force, the leader must be able to control the people below. And now, besides Yi Xian, there is only Shang Yu and Shang Yu in Blue Sword sect. Shang Yu can control both the inside and the outside world. And Yi Xian can not only control both the inside and the outside world. At this time, Chen Beihan suddenly smiled. Actually, there is one more thing. He doesn't care about the position of sect leader. Then, he shook his head and smiled. If this person doesn't die young, his future will not be in Blue Sword sect. Jian Xian was silent for a moment and then stood up. You decide. With that, he turned around and left the hall. Inside the hall, Chen Beihan sighed softly. No one knew what he was thinking. Cloud's Word Hall. After Yi Xian returned to the Cloudy Sword Hall, Lin Songyun followed. Only Yi Xian and Lin Songyun were in the hall, while Yu Qi was in the inner hall. In front of Yi Xian, Lin Songyun said in a low voice, Are you really not coming with me? Once the crisis was over, he hoped to bring Yi Xian away from the Azure Firmament world. If Yi Xian was willing to leave, he was confident that he could bring Yi Xian back to the Spirit Void Star Palace. It was extremely difficult to chase after someone in the vast starry sky. Yi Xian shook his head. Senior, I also want to see her, but I really can't leave now. Right now, the crisis of the Pale Sword sect had yet to be resolved. Moreover, he still had many things to do. Lin Songyun sighed in a low voice. If you stay here, I do not dare to guarantee your safety. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then asked, Is she all right? Lin Songyun smiled bitterly. Of course she's fine. It's just that her temper, it's hard to explain. He would never forget the scene of the plain-dressed woman's first day at the Spirit Void Star Palace. Domineering. The feeling the plain-dressed woman gave him was domineering, incomparably domineering. Moreover, she was unreasonably strong. Hearing Lin Songyun's words, the domineering side of the plain-dressed woman appeared in Yi Xian's mind. It had to be said that her temper was truly explosive. Back then, she had wanted to destroy the azure firmament world with a single sword strike. At this moment, Lin Songyun said softly, "Since you don't want to leave now, then I'll accompany you in this world for a while. I've already sent Qin Jin back. At most, in a month and a half, the experts of my Spirit Void Star Palace will arrive here." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Can you beat them?" Lin Songyun smiled. "Do you know how big the world is?" Yi Xian shook his head. Lin Songyun pointed upwards, then said, "The vast universe is boundless. In the depths of this vast universe, there are star fields, and within these star fields, there are countless worlds. Some of these worlds have life, and some don't. And my Spirit Void Star Palace controls the Spirit Void Star Field, which is at least a dozen times larger than your star field." "A dozen times larger." Yi Xian's heart trembled, and he asked again, "Then this azure firmament world I'm in is actually very small, right?" Lin Songyun smiled. "Of course it's very small." Saying this, he said softly, "Actually, the stronger you become, the more you will realize how small you are. Because as you become stronger, you will come into contact with even more things. Before I met her, my Spirit Void Star Palace was already the overlord of that star field. In the Spirit Void Star Field, we could be said to be an invincible existence. Yet, with one sword strike, she almost destroyed us." Saying this, he shook his head. "People always have to lower themselves at all times. You may be strong, but there will always be people stronger than you." Hearing this, Yi Xian was a bit moved. He had seen a lot of experts before. The strongest was none other than the plain-clothed woman, and the plain-clothed woman had never attacked him. Thus, when he faced the plain-clothed woman, he did not feel any sense of helplessness. But when facing the white-haired man, he had felt a deep sense of helplessness. Facing this kind of expert, he could not do anything. If it wasn't for the pale sword sex sword formation, all of them would have died. At this time, Lin Songyun seemed to know what Yi Xian was thinking, and he smiled. "Don't underestimate yourself. It's already very rare for you to reach this level at such a young age. You have to know that that person has cultivated for at least thousands of years. If you were given that much time, you wouldn't be weaker than him, right?" Yi Xian thought about it, and then grinned. "That's true. Actually, I'm still very outstanding." Lin Songyun. A moment later, Lin Songyun left. Inside the hall, only Yi Xian was left. At this time, Yu Qi walked out. She glanced at Yi Xian. "Go to consecutive brush peak." Yi Xian was struck dumb. Then he asked, "Why?" Yu Qi said indifferently, "Nangong is senior brother Lian's disciple." Yi Xian was silent. Yu Qi walked in front of him. "Nangong betrayed the sect, it was his fault. You killing him is also not wrong. But do you understand what I mean?" Yi Xian nodded. "I understand." Yu Qi nodded. Being a person is often more important than cultivating. With that, she turned and returned to the inner hall. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian left Cloudy Sword Hall and came to Consecutive Brush Peak. Inside Consecutive Brush Peak Hall, Lian Bixian glanced at Yi Xian. "What's the matter?" Yi Xian bowed slightly. "I met Nangong Shanyue before. Nangong doesn't give me the feeling that he's a despicable person." "Why would he?" Lian Bixian glanced at Yi Xian. "Under jealousy, do you understand?" "Jealousy." Yi Xian was silent. Lian Bixian said softly, "What's the scariest?" "Being unable to see others do well is the scariest." All these years, he's been suppressed by Shangyu. And after you came, he was suppressed by you again. Suppressed by Shangyu, there's still a day when he can stand out. At least he thinks that if he works hard, he has a chance to surpass Shangyu. But for you. Saying this, he glanced at Yi Xian. For you, he can't see such hope. You're so outstanding that even the older generation blushes with shame. Yi Xian lowered his head. I've never thought so much. Lian Bixian shook his head. It's not your fault. I've been negligent all these years. Saying this, he looked at Yi Xian. If you become the sect leader in the future, you must remember this. It's impossible for a person to not make mistakes in life. Many times, if a disciple makes a mistake, as the sect leader, you shouldn't just kill him. You should give him a chance to turn over a new leaf. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. He knew that the person in front of him still held a grudge. After all, Nangong was nurtured by the other party. He must have feelings for him. Lian Bixian nodded. Go back. Tell junior sister that I'm a person who distinguishes between good and evil. If he's right, he's right. If he's wrong, he's wrong. It's Nangong's fault for sneaking up on you. It's understandable for you to kill him. I won't have any other thoughts. Yi Xian bowed slightly, then turned around and left. In the hall, Lian Bixian closed his eyes slowly. After a long time, he shook his head and sighed. Silly. After leaving Lian Bixian Peak, Yi Xian walked towards Weapon Forging Peak. Actually, he didn't regret killing Nangong. Because if it wasn't for his special cultivation technique, Nangong's sword would have taken his life. When Nangong chose to be his enemy, their past friendship naturally vanished. Towards his enemies, Yi Xian would never be merciful. Not long later, Yi Xian arrived at Weapon Forging Peak. Zhang Tai glanced at Yi Xian and said directly, I don't have any treasures here. Go look elsewhere. Yi Xian's face darkened. Am I that kind of person? Am I? Yi Xian didn't say anything. He took out 100 purple source crystals and placed them in front of Zhang Tai. In the previous battle, Martial Uncle was invincible and exhausted too much of your Xian Qi. These purple source crystals are a small token of my appreciation. I hope Martial Uncle will accept it. Zhang Tai glanced at the purple source crystals before looking at Yi Xian. What do you mean exhausted too much Xian Qi? Can't you just say that I'm seriously injured? Yi Xian chuckled and turned to run. In the cave, Zhang Tai looked at the 100 purple source crystals for a long time. In the end, he shook his head with a smile and kept the purple source crystals. After leaving Weapon Forging Peak, Yi Xian went to the other peaks. He was left with less than 200 purple source crystals. Of course, he didn't feel any heartache. An hour later, Yi Xian returned to Cloudsword Peak. There was one more person in Cloudsword Hall. It was Martial Uncle Gu from Array Dao Peak. Since Array Dao Peak was destroyed, she was here to stay temporarily. The first thing Martial Uncle Gu said to Yi Xian was, Go cook. Yi Xian, nightfall. Yi Xian sat at the entrance of Cloudsword Hall and took out a voice transmission talisman. After a while, Yi Xian kept the talisman and said softly, There are some things that I should do, /11_. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.